Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another in-depth analysis of a Kings of War tournament. This is Fools of War, aptly named, being on the 1st and 2nd of April. So there are plenty of fools in attendance, I can tell you. This took place at Element Games, and it was a 2-day event, making it worth quite a lot of ranking points in the official, I'm not sure how official they are, but the Kings of War rankings. 2-day events tend to be worth quite a bit more. So it was a fairly strong field, lots of the big hitters. You might say it was a who's who of the dangerous players, at least within striking distance of Manchester. So if you want to know all about my list, where I do an in-depth analysis, there was a video on Friday in which I went into it with a great amount of detail and poured over every single aspect of the list and my thoughts behind it. But I'm just going to give you the brief rundown of it in a moment. So there weren't any particularly bizarre rules for this tournament. It was the standard scoring from the new Clash of Kings book, which is familiar for most people that have played War Games tournaments. 15 points for a win, 10 for a draw, 5 for a loss, and then that's adjusted up or down by 5 depending on the difference between how much you killed and how much your opponent killed. So it pays to keep your army intact in this tournament. Unlike last week's, where it was all about how much you kill, this is the difference between the two. So let's start off by having a quick look at my list while you have a look at this shot of game 1 about to start. So you can see it started on table 9, and I'll be hoping to advance through the tables rapidly towards the top as the day goes on. My expectations for this tournament, by the way, were somewhere in the top half, aiming for top quarter or top third, because it was a very strong lineup of players here. So here's my list. Skeleton Warriors. I'll point them out to you on here as well. I think you can see the arrow. So Skeleton Warriors up there. Just a regiment of those. 2 troops of Wraiths, which are new additions to my army. There's one there, there's one there, there's a blue one, and there's a purple one. So you can see them standing out among all the green. Then we've got the Zombie Legion. So I've taken out one of them, just got one with the Hammer of Measured Force. So they're always going to be wounding on 4s, regardless what they're fighting. So that's situational, but it could come in very handy. It'll stop them being bogged down by really high defense units, at least. Then we've got Werewolves down here with the Brew of Strength. So that's a bit of a change from the last tournament where they had a different item. This time I'm just giving them that extra crushing strength to make them a bit more dangerous when they hit, hopefully. Then behind them is Lykanis, who is a new addition to the list, who is like a werewolf hero. So we'll see how he does. Then we've got Soul Reaver Cavalry right here with the Potion of the Caterpillar, as usual. People should know how much I love them by now. Then we've got Revenant Cavalry, which is also regiment-sized right there. They don't have any particular item on them, though, and they're being represented by dire wolves and a corpse cart. So it's the right size and everything. So that's what they are. We've also got, did I mention, Revenant King on a horse right here? He doesn't have anything fancy apart from his horse. By the way, Lykanis has the Mace of Crushing, so he can re-roll one failed damage roll. There's a Necromancer there with Inspiring Talisman and Weakness to make it harder for the enemy to wound people. And up at the top, you can probably just about make out the Revenant King on Undead Wyrm, who has the Blade of Slashing to reroll one of his misses. And I think that's everything in my list. So, the first scenario is Invade. So, trying to get units into the other player's half, and you can see that I'm against Orcs, and you may immediately recognize this army, since I have multiple battle reports against this army, and we always seem to draw each other in the first round of tournaments. But going into this, I did have a 100% record in these matchups, so we'll see how this one goes. But you can see that he has got quite a bit of infantry. He's got a big horde, he's got 2 regiments of infantry, he's got 3 cavalry regiments, horde of trolls, he's got Gakamak, and he's also got a Krudger on winged slasher. So quite a scary prospect. By the way, if anyone is watching this live now, then can you leave a comment to confirm you can actually hear me, because there doesn't seem to be much activity in the chat box at the moment. So anyone who's watching live, just confirm that you can actually hear my voice right now, so I don't go on and waste 2 or 3 hours talking about this, but no one can actually hear me. So, for the invade scenario, I'll go through my deployment thinking now, up against orcs, who are cavalry heavy. I've got the speed edge, but he's not slow by any means, because one of these cavalry units has the Brew of Haste, and one of them has the Caterpillar Potion. So there's lots of terrain on these tables, as always. There's a big piece of height 4 terrain there that no one's going to be able to pass through. So that's going to be an interesting item right there. I can't remember who chose the sides, but if I was picking sides, I probably would have picked this side here, because that rock there could prevent entry into this half of the table potentially, because it seems to be slightly more on this side. That could just be an optical illusion though. Okay, moving on. So you can see it from a totally different angle here, and you can see my deployment. I've still had no comments, guys. You know what, I'm just going to type in the comment box now. Comment if you can hear me or not. Just want to make absolutely sure. I'm assuming someone is watching it to say that there are viewers in there. And it's nice that it doesn't ruin my screen share when I click on the comment box as well. That's a nice feature. Okay, so you can see my thinking here. I've got the werewolves covering that flank. There's a piece of terrain there that I couldn't obviously deploy things behind wisely other than flyers. And I've basically got all my heavy hitters at this end, because I think I can punch through that block he's got there, and he's got quite a lot on this flank. He's got his 2 mean characters, and on this side he's got more heavy hitters on this side, but he's got more meat in terms of nerve value on that side. So over here I'm facing them down with zombies, because really it's kind of wasted hitting power if all these units, particularly trolls and cavalry, are going after zombies. It's not particularly good use of their resources, because they'd be better off using it on something with higher defense, ideally, like my cavalry, for example. My Revenant cavalry are just kind of chilling in the middle. They're going to be used to go whichever way I deem necessary. You might send people that side of the rock. And my Soul Reavers are in terrain, because they're going to ignore the effects of that when it comes to charging, so they can quite happily start in there. And if something wished to charge them, for example, really fast Crudger on Slasher, then it would become hindered when it charged them. And I'm going to use my flyer to push up the flank, and using these woods here, if he wants to go into the woods, that's fine, because I don't think his Caterpillar cavalry are over here. So I'm just going to position myself over here and just stare into his flank and give him something to think about. So he can either be flank charged by that or flank charged by zombies. Or if he can be clever, he could avoid both of those things. Okay, next image. I've still had no confirmation that the audience can actually hear what I'm saying. That's very worrying. It appears that the microphone is active. Still waiting for someone to type something though. I don't want to risk opening up my own window and listening to it myself right now, because that could have disastrous consequences for the screen sharing capabilities. It's very weird the way Hangouts work, the way you have to screen share things that you're sharing from files on the desktop rather than in a browser window. So I believe I let him go first, and I usually let my opponent go first because I want to have the last chance to strike, especially on a scenario where there's a particular objective in mind, for example, dashing into the opponent's half. I think being able to have the last go at that can be quite important. And Nathan Pope in the audience has confirmed that I am perfectly audible, which is nice. So he is pushing his trolls forward here, and I think he'd already started moving when I was taking pictures of his army, because I do tend to take all the pictures during my opponent's turn. It's very convenient that way. And you can see the close-up of the positioning of all his forces here, and close-up of my setup. The zombies have changed the kind of tray they're on. Previously, it was a 50 model tray with just a 10 tacked onto the back. This time I've gone for 2 30 model trays together. So it's a bit more even, and hopefully should result in less weird dangling at the back from that stray part of the unit. And you can see, I like these woods that were present at this tournament, because the trees can all be taken off them, which is very, very handy. And they're fairly flat, so there's not going to be too much sliding down them. The same can't be said for all of the hills. There are a couple of very slippery, slidey hills at the tournament. Over here you can see the turn dice. It's always nice to have a big piece of obstructive terrain that you can just pop the turn dice on top of. You can see there that one of the werewolves has just been taken out the unit to use as Lykanis and replaced with gravestones. Highly suspicious. So we're officially on turn 1 now, and this is his full advance. He's just going forward full throttle pretty much. He's got Orklings there, which are going to be mildly annoying because they're going to prevent me charging his cavalry. He's keeping the cavalry at the back. He knows I don't have any shooting, so he's not really slowing himself down by doing this. Well, he is, but he doesn't mind that because I'm not going to be shooting up the slower units in the front. So I don't think he really has any shooting either, other than maybe something on his caster, perhaps. And he's hiding that guy behind his cavalry because he doesn't want... I think he's avoiding wraiths going after him. That's what I'm assuming he's doing there. Because you don't want wraiths flying and attacking your individuals. It's probably a bad idea, getting behind your lines that way. Because wraiths typically only move 10 inches, but if you can get a charge with them, then of course they can charge the full 20, but they can't move at the double. So if you can charge something hiding just behind enemy lines, that's the ideal situation, but they're only height 1, so they won't be able to see his caster. He's pushed all in on this flank as well. And he's moved to within charge range of most of my stuff, which he would have to at some point because I do have the speed edge on him. The only thing he's got that's really as fast as what I have, he's got the Crudger, of course, and he's also got one of these Orc units with the Brew of Haste, which makes them pretty speedy. And you can see my first move immediately was to get this guy, Undead Wyrm with Revenant King on it, into position to look into his flank. So he's obviously going to have to do something about that. He doesn't want that thing charging into the flank of these units in particular. Trolls or cavalry, those are the juiciest targets for this guy. Or anything with defense 5 is really juicy, really, because he's going to be wounding on 2s with his crushing strength 3. So that's what he wants. He wants more attacks because he only has 9, hitting on 4s, so it's not that amazing. So if he can get into a flank, that's going to be perfect for him. Then you can see I decided to go all in as well. I couldn't get Lykanis into combat. I think he was just slightly too far back because he was slightly behind the werewolves, but I did get all these units in. And let's see. What else? Did I send something else in here? I'm not sure. Maybe the Revenant King didn't go in. Maybe he just moved up there and didn't charge. Let me see. So, yes, I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. Oh, I see what it is. They both went in and then they centered, and now he is countercharging. It looks like he's countercharging the Revenant King. So that's why he's lining up there. Okay, that makes a bit more sense. I'm not sure if that's actually the correct way to do it with an individual. But I'm not sure what you do in that situation where there's a unit right there. Interesting, but you can see I did a bit of damage on these units with the initial charge. I just wanted to get the first hit in, and then I've got my Soul Reavers coming in shortly, just off camera in the bottom right here. And also Lykanis is going to be able to help out because he is nimble, so he's going to be able to nip into one of these combats as well, hopefully. So, you can see there the 1 damage confirmed there from the Wraiths. Not a lot, but I just wanted to stop them flanking the werewolves. So that's why you would typically go in all in. Negatorx says you can charge the individual. Yes, you can countercharge the individual, but I'm wondering whether he's supposed to align to the individual. I think that is correct, because the individual has to turn to face you and then you align to him. So I think that is right. Okay, so 1 damage on there from the Wraiths, 5 damage on this. It's not a huge amount from the werewolves and the Revenant King there, but it's a start, and I've still got the Soul Reavers to come in. So the reason I send in multiple charges at once is to avoid the flank attack. So even though I knew the Wraiths weren't going to kill this unit in one go, I sent them in there just to stop the flank attack. And in turn 2. So you can see here that, okay, what's this a picture of? Well, he's got Gakamak positioned there, staring over this way, but he's out of sight of the Soul Reavers, so that's quite an important detail there. And he's also moved the Winged Slasher right into that position there. you'll be able to see better what he's looking at. So he's really just looking out over his lines because he knows I'm going to be able to strike at everything in a second. So if he's looking kind of in this direction, anything that charges into his units, the slasher will be able to help out with a counterattack. So he obviously thinks he needs more help on this side than he does on this side. And of course, Gekamek, being an individual, can charge off in any direction. But he's positioned himself so he's not going to get flank charged by my Revenant King on Undead Wyrm with the trolls, because that would have been bad news. And you can see how he's done that there by just angling them. But it does mean that he's avoided advancing, but he has sent these units forward a bit. So I'm going to have to attack quite a lot of these in one go to stop them getting the charge on me. Because even though they're behind Orklings, the Orklings could easily just move out the way or declare a combo charge with this unit, because they can see over the Orklings. So I am going to have to strike in my next turn to avoid being charged by him, which in Invade can be quite important if you're fighting along the center line. Having the first charge, so you're fighting either on the line or just in the opponent's half, is better than fighting in your own half. Over here you can see he actually wavers the werewolves when he can. I think he must have charged into them rather than the Revenant King. Maybe I just took the picture when he was deciding what to do. I think what he was actually doing, if we go back, let's see, he may have been working out what he could charge when I took this picture. He was deciding what to do with the slasher, because of course he had the option of charging the slasher into the werewolves and charging these guys into the Revenant King, or do a multi-charge with these and the slasher. I think that's what he was probably thinking about doing, all of these into the werewolves. But in the end, he decided he needed the slasher over there, so he just went in with that unit, which is why they sent it up again in a minute. So a bit of insight into the opponent's thought process there as well, not just mine. So werewolves have been wavered. That's not good news at all. Then you can see here the aftermath of me going all in with some charges. So the Soul Reavers have gone into that big unit there because they're needed right now, with the werewolves being wavered, and everything else has gone forward. The skeletons and the zombies have moved up. The Wraiths managed to get into the flank of his trolls, and the Revenant King on Undead Wyrm got into the flank of his Orc regiment there, because he may have guarded the troll flank, but he didn't guard that one. There was just enough distance for the king to get in there. And this cavalry unit here, the Revenants, they took out the Orklings in one hit. So you can see just how tight all this is here. There's not that much space, but you can see there's just enough for both these charges to be possible. But I actually forgot this happened. I had forgotten that I rolled a double one in this game, but I actually did here on these Orcs. I only did, that looks like 8 damage. So I think I would have needed quite a few more than that anyway. So it's not like the worst kind of double one you can get, where you've just got them way over what you need to kill them and then roll a double one. So I think any low roll would have avoided killing them here. I would imagine their nerve is somewhere in the region of 14 or so. Okay, and then I only did 4 into the flank of the trolls, but it's a start unless they regenerate it all back. Okay, so the next image here, you can see close-up of what happened here. I put much more damage onto this Orc unit now, and I've wavered them now, which is going to be really bad, because the Soul Reavers did pretty much all of that, I'm going to assume, and then the Wraiths and Lykanis did the damage to this unit here. But this big unit being wavered is really bad, because it holds up his cavalry, because the cavalry are on a hill, and they're taller regardless, so they would have been able to do a combo charge with these into one unit, perhaps. Or they could have charged different targets. Maybe. I think he would have had just enough space to pull that off. Possibly. It would have been tricky, though. I suppose if these guys had countercharged the Wraiths, that would have freed up a bit more space as well. So it may have been possible for him to declare a multi-charge in this zone here if they hadn't become wavered, but they have. So that's bad news for him. Turn 3. So he shrugs off the effects of 2 of those wounds with the trolls, with the regen. And the cavalry that were behind, they decide they're not going to sit there and countercharge Wraiths and then get flank charged by zombies. They're just going to take the fight to the zombies immediately, double charge them. And if you want to get rid of a zombie legion, that's the way to do it in one go. You have to multi-charge them with 2 big hitting units. And over here, he manages to get multi-charges onto the Revenant cavalry. I'm not sure what that is for. Oh, I think he may have cast weakness onto them. I think that's what that represents. It didn't seem like it made any difference, though, because they still took out the Orklings in one go. Then here, oh, he may have just cast it at them while they were in combat. Are you allowed to do that? I'm not sure. Maybe it was just from the last turn. I haven't taken the token away yet. But you can see my Revenant King is just lurking around here. He's going to be fairly important in a minute. And you can see the two units here of mine that committed those charges. They're just kind of staring at nothing now because the units they charged declined to countercharge them and ran away. The trolls went over that way, and this regiment of orcs have gone into the flank of the Revenant cavalry, who are fairly expendable. And you can see he kills the wraiths here. So I wasn't expecting them to go. The werewolves haven't taken the token off yet, so they didn't get wavered twice, because obviously that unit can't fight. So Lykanis is just chilling on his own there. Over here, you can see Gekamak goes into the Soul Reavers, and he does 5 damage. So he is an absolute beast. When you look at his stats, he is to be feared, even for a heavy cavalry unit. And you can see, yeah, it only actually does 9 damage to the Revenant cavalry with all these attacks. A lot of it was hindered, though, because he was in that difficult terrain. So it wasn't a very good roll to only do 9 damage, and he couldn't remove them. He would have needed an 8 to kill them from there, and he didn't achieve that. And you can see here the trolls and the cavalry do actually take out the zombie legion in one go. So possibly bad news for this flank of the undead there. With it being invade as well, he's got potentially a horde and a regiment that could be entering my half of the table now. But he elects to face them back into the battle because he thinks he can actually do more killing. And the skeletons are just kind of not doing anything now. I'm going to have to do something with them in my next turn, and I surely will, because look at this. You'll notice the trolls are dead. That's because the wraiths were able to charge the flank of the trolls. I don't remember whether they had the charge just from the angle or whether they had to move and then be surged, but the skeletons were definitely able to charge the front. So those trolls, boom, they'd only taken 2 damage. Wraiths and skeletons, the wraiths were definitely in the flank though. So that was quite a lot of attacks, and that took out the trolls in 1 hit. So that's bad news for him, and he's just got these cavalry there staring down those 2 unhurt units now. And you can see over here that the Revenant King in the rear was able to take out that regiment of orcs with a ton of attacks, so they're dead. So the fact that they didn't finish off the Revenant cavalry came back to bite them there, because they could have turned around to face the threat, but now they can't. The Revenant King there puts a wound onto the God Speaker, which is going to prevent him from casting anything, which I'm quite pleased about. I see we've got 14 viewers at the moment, so let me know if you've got any comments or observations or questions, anything that wasn't clear with the pictures. Obviously, it's quite difficult taking pictures while playing the game. The only thing that suffers, really, I probably give my opponents the opportunity to cheat if they really feel like it. I'm sure none of them do, but while I'm taking pictures, I'm sure they could steal an extra inch, because I'm very rarely looking at any of their movement. Usually I just ask them after the movement whether they intended to be out of someone's charge arc or something. I'm not that bothered about tracking exact distances. So you can see here that big unit of orcs is dead. I think I only used the werewolves, and Lykanis killed off that regiment. Werewolves killed off the horde, which allowed the Soul Reavers to countercharge Gekamak. I thought I might be able to get rid of him, but only 5 damage on him. So the Soul Reavers could end up getting flank charged by this cavalry unit here. So that's why I've got the werewolves and Lykanis just aiming in that direction, as if to say, if you do that, you better wipe them out, otherwise we're coming for your flank, matey. Turn 4. Hello to Brendan Duffy in the chat there. So he manages to get a charge onto the wraiths here. There was just enough space because I overran the skeletons. If they'd gone 1 more inch, he wouldn't have been able to turn and do this. But he had just enough space to charge the wraiths. And that's what he wanted to do. Because if he went into the skeletons, their nerve is so high, there's a reasonable chance that he wouldn't have been able to kill them. The wraiths are a bit more fragile, their nerve is lower, their defense is higher, but a cavalry unit that weren't just hit, they have Crushing 1, Thunderous 1, I think, so they've got a decent chance of taking out the wraiths. And he thinks they're more dangerous, presumably. Over here, he sends these 2 surviving units into the remains of the Revenant Cavalry. Hello to Stu Gibson there in the chat. And he charges his God Speaker because he can't use any spells because I damaged him in melee in the last turn. So he charges into the Revenant King on Undead Wyrm, hoping to just get lucky and do 1 damage to stop it flying. But that doesn't work. Over here you can see that he decides to charge the werewolves with this cavalry unit, and I'd set it up so it would be a front charge. He decides not to go into the flank of the Soul Reavers. He maybe suspected that was a fiendish plot, or maybe he thought he could kill both these units in one go because the werewolves were already damaged. And the Soul Reavers, taking hits from Gakamak is never fun, although they do life leech too because they are vampires. So that's why they've gained some wounds back. But look at that, Gakamak wavers them by putting quite a bit more damage on them. And the werewolves are dead as well. So that plan of his obviously works right there. It's just Lykanis staring down that unit now. And over here, he kills off the Revenant Cavalry. So my units are dropping like flies. So in the previous turn, I killed about half of his army. And then in retaliation, he killed about half of mine. So it's very, very close at the moment, and it's being an absolute bloodbath. Over here, the skeletons and the wraiths, because the wraiths weren't killed by that charge from the cavalry unit, even though they took 7 damage, he couldn't roll a 5 to kill them. Didn't quite roll high enough, which meant that he was able to get double charged by both these units into, what are the Orc cavalry even called again? I can't remember now. But they were killed, they were undamaged, but these 2 units took them out in one go. So these 2 have taken out trolls and a full cavalry regiment. So that's quite a nice little team up they've had here on this flank. And that saved me a bit after the zombie legion was killed. Over here, you can see that his other cavalry unit died because the undead Wyrm with Revenant King on it was able to charge them, presumably in the rear, and then Lykanis into the front. That's what it looks like. And they killed that unit utterly. Let's see where the Revenant King on Undead Wyrm was the last time we saw. Okay, here he was. So he didn't take any damage, so he was able to fly all the way over there and charge into the cavalry that were just chilling in that area there. So turn 5. Don't think we missed a picture there. Okay, and we've used these green little tokens to mark out where the center line of the table was, I think, because that's going to be quite important right now. Because it's invade, remember, there's only potentially 2 turns left and you need to have units in the other player's half. So at the moment, there's not a whole lot of scoring going on at all. At the moment, I've got 1 point for Lykanis, 1 point for the Wyrm, and 1 point for the troop of wraiths, I think. Those are the only units that are scoring anything at the moment. He doesn't actually have any units fully in my half at this stage. And he's only got 2 scoring units left because he's got the Crudger on Winged Slasher and this cavalry unit. They were chilling around here, weren't they? Because they'd... Let's have a look. Yes, it was this unit here. So he's not got much left to score with, but my Soul Reavers are at death's door a bit. They've taken 9 damage and they're staring down Gakamak and the Crudger as well. You can see that the Revenant King tried to attack it, but it's only taken 5 damage in total throughout the game. So it's not too close to being taken out yet. So it's looking good for me at the moment in terms of numbers of units, because the skeletons, of course, score as well. They're a regiment. They're worth as much as that unit. And any monsters or heroes are only worth 1, and if they're individuals, they're not worth anything. So his 2 individuals, especially Gakamak, that's quite expensive, isn't going to get him any points here. Then you can see he kills the Soul Reavers with Gakamak and a double charge there. And then in retaliation, I double charged Lykanis and the Revenant King on Wyrm into his slasher. But look at that, I only rolled a 3 for the nerve test after doing 13 damage total on it. Oh dear, I only wavered it. So that could be bad news. We'll find out shortly, but that is a scoring unit of his that survived, and it also means that I'm not going to be able to turn to face any other directions if I so wished. Over here, I tried to attack the God Speaker with the Revenant King to stop him casting any spells in his final turn, but couldn't do any damage to him. So that's not good. But I also want the Revenant King over on this side because I've got another plan. And you'll see here that I move my skeletons into his half of the table, making sure that I'm presenting the flank so that if he wants to charge them, he'll be charging back into his own half of the table. And it's not a rear charge, so he can't just back up D3 inches and get into my half. He has to charge the flank if he wants to kill them. And that's a tough choice for him, because if he does kill them, all he could do is turn to face my half of the table and then hope there's a turn 7. And if the game ends there, they'll be stuck in his own half and he won't get any points for them. So at the moment, these two units are worth the same. So they're cancelling each other out. So I'm just giving him a bit of a dilemma there. Does he take them out of the scoring area or not? And really, he probably should, unless he thinks he's going to get unlucky and just fail to kill the skeletons. Turn 6. So Lykanis is double charged by the Slasher and Gakamak, and I think he actually dies. And the Cavalry here charge into the flank of the skeletons, as expected. And they kill them, and they turn to face my half of the table, so they need there to be a turn 7 now, so they can just move into my half. If it's turn 6, they'll be trapped there forever. But, sly old me, I brought the Revenant King over here for the sole purpose of parking him directly in front of them, so that when they attack him, they will have to kill him and then overrun like 4 or 5 or 6 inches to get past him into my half. It'll be a decent overrun they need, because he's pretty much on the center line. Let's have a look. It's right there, so the Revenant King is right there. So they would need a decent overrun, and that's if they kill him, which is no certainty because he is defense 5 and his nerve isn't that bad for an individual. And there's no way of them getting past without charging him. So that's not going to be good news for them. And I do kill the Slasher. I prioritized killing that over Gakamak because the Slasher is a scoring unit. So my Revenant King on Wyrm killed that and then went backwards, D3, I think, into the opponent's half of the table. So he's the only unit that's scoring any points at the moment, and he's worth 1 point. And look at this, we are going to get a turn 7. So he is going to have a chance to win it. He goes in and does 5 damage to the Revenant King, but he can't kill him. So that unit of cavalry are stuck in his own half. Wow. So he scores. The Revenant King on Undead Wyrm is the only unit scoring a point. So that means it's going to be a win for me, because I just flew away pretty much away from Gakamak as far as I could, just to drive home the point that I'm stuck in his half there. So I get 1 point. No points for the Orcs because they only have an individual in my half. So I only had 2 models left. He only had 2 individuals and 1 regiment left. So that is a total bloodbath. In terms of points, he actually killed a few points more than me. He killed, I think it was just more than 100 more, which meant that he gets the bonus tournament point, which makes it a 14-6 win for me in game 1. So that was razor thin. It was entirely possible that the Revenant King on horse could have been killed by them, and then they could have overrun. But the odds were against killing him and also overrunning far enough. So I'm glad I kept him alive for that purpose. It's useful to keep those tricky little individuals with decent nerve and defense. Just park them in front of people to stop them getting to objectives. And you're going to see more of that as the tournament goes on. So game 1, win in the bag. But there are 5 more games to go because this was a 2-day event. So let's move on, shall we? You can see there, I managed to put 2 damage on them, but that's incidental. There's the death pile. So he killed all that. So plenty of killing done, and I killed all that. Total bloodbath. And you can see actually the table next to us here, there were people playing on it, but the roof was actually leaking onto the table, so they had to move them to a different table. And those buckets were there just to collect any dripping water because it had been raining that day. I'm sure those bottles of Coke aren't there to catch the rainwater. It was just these tubs. Okay, game 2, and it's very, very colourful immediately. So this is the ransack scenario. I believe it's called ransack. So there are lots of tokens around the place. Each player is able to place 2, and there is also, no, that's wrong. Each player is able to place 3, is it? Yeah, I think it's 3. Yes, it is. So there were going to be 6 tokens put about, I don't think you can put them too close to each other, but they're worth a random amount. Each one is worth D3, and this tournament actually had special ransack tokens, which was nice. So you put down the tokens before you pick sides, and I was up against the Trident Realms, who I had never faced before, but they had some dwarf allies as well, which were shooters, and they had a bit of a bolt thrower as well. So we had some ranged, so when I was picking the sides, I think I got the chance to pick which side I wanted. But in terms of placing the objectives, I thought I'd put them somewhere that he wouldn't want. So I put one right behind this house down here, thinking, well, if he's going to leave something back, it would be shooting units, and he doesn't want to put them behind a house, so that's not going to be good for him. And then if I get this side, then I can just put the cheap skeletons or something on it and just hide them for the whole game. And that one was worth 2 points. I think he put one in the middle. I got a 3 token, so I put that here behind a hill with the same thinking. He wouldn't want to put a shooting unit behind that, and I could hide something there for the whole game and make him come to me because I was rolling quite high here. So I was overloading this side of the board with as many points as possible. Then I got another 3, which I put inside these woods with similar thinking, but also hedging my bets a little bit in case I get that side and it'd be tricky to get to these ones. At least I've got one right there that I can get to. And there's a token that's worth 1 up at the top somewhere there. And there's a 2 in the center, and then there's a 3 over here somewhere. So this side has the most value in tokens if you include that. There's like a triangle of really valuable tokens here. And that's why I wanted this side. And I actually won the roll off, so I picked this side. And you can see that I stuck the skeletons right on that one. I've put 3 units around this one. And I've got Wraiths and my Soul Reavers here because that one's inside the woods. So my plan is to sit a unit just behind the woods, and then in turn 6 they'll hop into the woods onto it, and then they may have to face 1 turn of shooting. And Soul Reavers in particular would be able to survive that, being defense 6. So it's going to completely take them out of the game, and I'm not going to do as much killing because of that, but they're far more likely to survive a round of shooting than any other unit that I could use for that purpose, I think. So that's what they're going to be used for. And just in case it goes horribly wrong elsewhere and I need them to come back, they're fast enough. Whereas if I were to use the Zombie Legion in that role, it would be a bit of a nightmare maneuvering them back in anywhere to get into the game. I've put 1 unit of Wraiths here, 1 over here, and I've also got my Revenant King on Wyrm over here. So I'm going to use these flyers to advance up this flank because he's only got 1 big monster there. And it's not that great a monster. It's okay at fighting, but it doesn't have a very high defense. So he's got this little battery of shooting here as well with 1 tiny unit guarding it. So if I can gobble through that, I can then get behind his lines. And on this side, I've just put my Werewolves and Lykanis. He's got more shooting over there. So I'm hoping that, first of all, I just want to distract him and hold him up over here, which is really far away from this triangle of valuable tokens that I want to protect. So if I can keep him on that side of the table with plenty of his army until the last couple of turns, he's not going to have a chance to come and claim this. So these 3 are worth more than the other 3. So if I can sit on these for the entire game, then I'm going to win. Whew, okay. So you can see the specifics of my setup here. The skeletons are actually on top of the token, so you can't quite see it. And these guys, especially the king on the Wyrm, doesn't need to see anything at the moment because he's just going to fly directly forwards 20 inches as soon as he gets a chance. Over here, you can see the 3 token there. That's going to be valuable. He has got shooting up there, so I'm going to have to take some evasive action at some point with this. And these units are positioned behind this tower to kind of avoid his Trident Realms bolt thrower, whatever it's called, I can't remember. But he will be able to see the werewolves a tiny bit, but not Lykanis. He gets the first turn, or I probably let him have the first turn, and he moves up this unit here. These actually fly, but they're only speed 6. So I'm not too concerned about them. He's got his bolt thrower right in the corner, so it's got a really good angle of shot all the way across the table, pretty much. 48-inch range, so it can't shoot all the way to the other corner, but it's decent range. And this big unit he's got in the middle, one of them, I think it's this one, are really tough. They have regen, some ridiculous regeneration number, like 3+ or 4+, and they have ensnare as well, so you're -1 to hit them in the front. So they're really tough. These other units aren't quite so dangerous, and he's got another one of those monsters there that have quite low defense, but they're decent at striking. And then he's got That is an organ gun. It's like dwarf pirates who are teamed up with the fishmen that they've found. So it's quite a nice theme when he's based the dwarves up to be pirates. That's going to look like a very nice army when it doesn't have the grass in there as well. Because you can see here, just these 3 units together, how good they look, and these ones here. So that organ gun is obviously going to move onto the hill and then start shooting away. And there's his other deployment, that little battery he's got up there. He doesn't have any tokens he wants to fight for over here, so they're just purely there to shoot. But I'm hoping I can just steamroll over them with my flyers and then get into his rear. Turn 1. So this is turn 1 for reals. I think they used a vanguard move, and then they moved even further up. And he's positioned various units overlooking this area. I don't actually realise at this point that this creature is facing in this direction. I don't know how. I may have just totally missed it. Missed that it existed, or thought a different part of it was the head or something, but I didn't realise it was facing this way at the time. So, with that in mind, I move my werewolves up to this crevice here so they can't be flanked by anybody, and I've moved Lykanis out of their arc, and I'm making a beeline straight for that machine. I can't charge it next turn, but he's going to have to put some resources in if he wants to stop me getting there, killing it, and then going for the one objective point, which is held by his dwarf shooters there. So he's going to have to turn some of his units to face this direction, away from all those valuable tokens I've got on the other side. And over here, I'm not advancing at all. And I think I actually moved this cavalry back to stop them being shot. Over here, advancing up, getting into a position to threaten his units at the top there with the Undead Wyrm with the Revenant King on it. Both Revenant Kings going over there in that direction, and the Wraith's just chilling there. These guys are not in the woods, so he can't see through the woods to see them. I would have to dip my toe into the woods if he was going to shoot these units. So they're safe there for now from shooting. There is an organ gun up there, though, but I think that's probably too far away and probably just facing the wrong way as well. He's overlooking the centre. Here you can see that the token is actually under the skeletons, just so you know I wasn't inventing that. And the one that's worth 3 with the zombies on it. The one that's worth 3 in the woods, which I'm going to jump onto at the end. He's got that one that's worth 2 in the centre. He's got 3 round about there with opponent arm in the shot there. And the one that those shooters are just sitting on. So I paid the price for not noticing which way this monster was facing, and it charged Lykanis. So that's not going to be fun. And he's kind of positioning all these units to threaten over here. He's sending this flying unit on the other side of the house, so the werewolves can't charge them. And he actually wavers. Does he? No, he doesn't even waver Lykanis. He only puts 3 damage on him. So as a result of that, Lykanis was able to charge this unit, and the werewolves came out and charged that monster. But they could only waver it, unfortunately. Only did 7 damage, which means that they're probably going to get charged in the flank by... I'm not sure if this unit has the range to do it, but something is going to be able to get in position. And up here, you can just see how he's setting up. He's using an awful lot of resources against the werewolves and Lykanis. So 2 of my units holding up a huge amount of his army there. And in the middle, he's moved this really deadly unit forward. He's just pushing them up, and he's shooting with the organ gun at the Revenant Cavalry, I think. Or they may have moved out of range of that, but he shot them with something, because you see they're up to 6 damage, so I don't want them to take any more hits. And over here, you can see this monster thought it was hiding behind the woods, but he forgot or neglected to remember that the Wraiths can move into the woods and then be surged into the rear by these 2 Revenant Kings. One on the Wyrm, one on the horse. So they both surged. I think they both had to make the correct distance to get into the rear there, but they only did 4 damage to the Wraiths, so it's a start. But he doesn't want to be stuck there fighting them, because then he'll probably get charged by this bad boy, and it's just not going to be fun times for him. And let's see. Oh, we can see a bit of the other table there. I don't know what's going on in that game, but it looks very lizardy. The skeletons are not going to move for the whole game. They're just going to sit there. We're up to 17 viewers now as people tune in for this detailed, tactical, in-depth analysis. Okay, so you can see a nice overview of what's going on here. I've still got this triangle of objectives that I want to keep. I don't actually own this one yet, but I can easily jump on it when necessary. Turn 3. He does actually get the flank charge with these dwarf rangers into the werewolves, so I'm not very confident there. And these things probably countercharged Lykanis, so I'm confident he's going to survive that, but he's got other units moving into position as well. Over here, he continues to push up with them, I think, and the organ gun still overlooking it, can see over this hill because it's on that hill, so it's going to shoot at wherever it likes that's in range. And you can see his monster that was fighting or was being attacked in the rear by the wraiths has moved down here now. You can see there he's moving in this direction. That's his wound dice, it just hasn't been moved up yet. So he doesn't want to get attacked by the wraiths, and it's going to be virtually impossible for me to get all the way down here and surged into him unless I want to commit my Revenant Kings in this direction. Kyle Poole made it on time-ish for once. Yes, I only gave about 10 minutes warning for the start of this show, I think. So I don't expect people to really watch this one live, because it's going to be quite a long one. We're only on game 2 and there's 6 games. So I'm feeling, well, I've got some refreshment here. Just taking a quick drink. So he probably wants me to attack that monster with the Revenant Cavalry, so he can maybe shoot them. But am I going to fall for that? Let's see. And over here, has anything happened since the last picture? I think this is just more of a general shot. You can see this unit turned round to face the werewolves, but they can't actually charge them yet because they were facing the wrong way. You can see the timer there as well. I've got 32 minutes. He's got 27 at this stage. But yes, the Revenant Cavalry, if it was bait, they took it, but they actually squished that monster in one go with a nerve roll of 11. So I think I needed 10 to get rid of it, and I rolled 11. So that was a bit of good fortune there. I decided to take the risk, and it paid off, so that thing is dead. Over here, I'm moving into this unit's flank. I charge it with the Revenant King on Wyrm and only do 3 damage. I think they have Ensnare as well, so he was hitting on 5s, but with all these units here, I'm going to be able to break through that in short order, surely. But I'm staying out of the firing arcs as well, so he doesn't just shoot these units down on their way in. Over here, it's the werewolves only took 1 damage from the rangers, and then they were able to finish off the monster that was here. Lykanis actually got wavered by something. It's got to be them, hasn't it? So the werewolves finished off that monster, and they turn around they're going to get flank charged by something, and they decide to take the flank charge of these slowish flyer unit there and take front charges from the rangers and maybe them. It depends. He's going to have trouble fitting all of it in, I think. And Lykanis is being annoying, being so far back, it might be difficult for everything to charge him. I think I backed up Lykanis towards the edge of the table while he was wavered. So another general overview here. You can see I've killed a couple of things. It's looking good for him over there in terms of fighting, but in terms of objectives, that doesn't really help him because I'm still holding this triangle that I wanted here. I've pushed the wraiths out a bit to the right, just in case he feels like attacking those zombies, so it's a little bit of a deterrent for him. And I've got this cavalry unit just chilling, also waiting to threaten that flank. So it's like a pincer. If he comes in to attack the zombies because he wants that objective, he's going to get gobbled up. And just a close-up shot of the movement of the wraiths. Although at this stage, I probably shouldn't have been moving wraiths away from the objective. I probably should have just been keeping units piled up on it. But I was going for killing this unit here rather than thinking about this objective entirely. Turn 4. So the werewolves get triple charged as expected. These guys weren't able to charge Lykanis, so he's going to survive another turn, which is going to hold his army up for another turn, just by being annoying. But the werewolves are going to die almost certainly to all this. And yes, they do. But Lykanis is still there, chilling. And here we go. He goes into the Wyrm. I think he does just a couple of damage there, so that's nothing to worry about, really. And then I've got more guys coming in, but I only get them up to 6 damage now, and still can't get rid of them, so that's annoying. The Revenant King is looking over here, though, so he's going to be able to attack someone different. He doesn't want to get bogged down in this horrible mess as well. And over here, look at this. I get a flank charge onto his big ensnaring horde into the flank, so they won't be ensnared. I did this with Surge, I moved the cavalry up into looking at the flank, and then I surged them in with the Necromancer. So that was nice. I managed to get 15 damage, as you can see, but I could only waver them. So with their insanely good regen, they might actually get a lot of that back in a minute. We'll see, but I think I got a bit unlucky not to kill them with a flank charge like that. Over here, they're all just pretty much turning to look at Lykanis, apart from the Rangers. I think they're looking over this way because they need to go over there a bit because he's got most of his army stuck over here. This little character here, which has high defense, but it's not particularly good at fighting, goes after the Wraiths. And it's a good move on his part because it means I can't then pivot the Wraiths and just move them back onto the objective if I need them. So they're going to be stuck fighting him unless I do some shenanigans like just turn to face completely the other way or move sideways. If I wanted to get away, what I would have to do would be to, if I don't kill him, I would have to just move sideways as far as I can and then hope to offer up a flank perhaps to hit that thing. So if it attacks them again, it would be in the flank. And then when they're attacked in the flank, because of the shape of the unit, I would then be able to pivot and then move away. Because at the moment they can't turn around and go this way because their pivot would take them to within an inch of the enemy. So they're a bit stuck there at the moment. But I'm really not pleased that that unit survived the flank charge. I thought that was going to be the ultimate master stroke that was going to take them out and guarantee me victory. But this hold up at the top here has been quite annoying. Turn 5. So, yep, the cavalry are dead. They were organ gunned to death as a result of not finishing off this unit that's not looking too tasty now. And over there, Lykanis gets charged. I think we'll get back to that in a moment, see how that goes. He probably survives, actually. Or does he? I don't know, maybe I just didn't take a picture of him being dead. Over here, I charge the Revenant King on horse into this shooter unit just to stop them shooting, because I might want to enter the woods with the Soul Reavers in a minute. And the Wraiths are fighting here, and I actually jump the Revenant King over this mess because there's no objectives to fight for here, and I can't be bothered taking another turn to chew through this. So he's just jumped all the way over the top, and he's going to run off over towards the objective in the other corner because he's only taken 1 damage, so he should be able to get there. So he actually regened almost, not quite all, but a lot of the damage I put on him with the cavalry. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to charge him with the zombies because they're damaged. The zombies have a ton of attacks. I could finish them off here. But unfortunately, I didn't roll that many wounds. I still put quite a bit of damage on them, but couldn't even waver them this time. It wasn't quite enough damage to really hope for anything like that. So the zombies are now too far away from the objective. So am I going to pay the price for getting too greedy and trying to kill this unit? But I'm banking on being able to just go backwards onto it. But there is something I neglected. Lykanis is dead, as you can see. But all these units are kind of out of the fight, but still in the game as far as objectives go, because there's one there that's worth 3. The Wraiths are still fighting that dude, but it's a bit of a pillow fight. Turn 6. So the organ gun shoots and wavers the Necromancer, which means I'm not going to be doing any surging. Over here you can see he flies away from the Wraiths with this annoying character and parks it right behind the zombies. And that means they're not going to be able to get back onto the objective, which is really bad news. So, what I was thinking when I charged that unit there, I was looking at the fact that he was going to kill off Lykanis, or had already killed him, and was moving in with these units. And the last thing I wanted was the zombies, if there was a turn 7, I didn't want the zombies being charged in the front by this horde, and in the flank by a flying unit, or dwarf rangers, which actually charged the wraiths. But if we go to turn 7 and the zombies were stuck there, they would have been triple charged, no doubt, and that probably would have killed them. So I thought if I can kill off that big ensnarer unit, I can pivot, be within 3 inches of that token right there, and be facing forwards for any charges here, and I'd be confident of surviving that. So the fact that I didn't kill off that unit, that risk is currently not paying off because I'm now not on the objective at the back that's worth 3. So I'm currently in a losing position. So they do kill the Wraiths in one go, in the flank, as you'd expect, so quite a lot of attacks there. And the Soul Reavers move on to that 3 objective there. And I've still got the 2 with the skeletons. He has got a 3 and a 2 as well. He's got the 2 there and the 3 which is there. So my Revenant King on Undead Wyrm flies. He could have charged. You can see actually this Revenant King was attacking the organ gun but didn't kill it. So the skeletons are on there. Soul Reavers on that one. They're still stuck fighting there, but there's no tokens involved. The zombies are too far away from the token. I tried to kill that thing and overrun, which would have put me within 3 inches of the objective, but I couldn't do it. So he's got that one that's worth 2. He's got that one that's worth 3, which I said, so at the moment we've got 5 each. And this one, which was behind his shooting unit, I had the option. I could take the risk, charge them in the front. If I kill them, I could overrun onto it and win the game. But I wasn't confident in my dice rolling at all. I thought I'd probably do maybe 3 damage on them and then not roll high enough to kill them, which would mean I lose the game. So I decided one gamble already didn't pay off with the zombies going into the ensnare horde. So I decided I'm not feeling lucky in this game. I'm just going to dive over the top and land on it and contest it. So neither of us own it. So it's going to end a draw if the game ends now. And if it doesn't, then I can always use him. Let's have a look at a wide shot. I can always use him to charge something else that's holding another objective, perhaps, if it goes to turn 7. So let's see how that turns out, shall we? The game is over because I rolled a 2 on the does the game continue roll. So it's all over. That means it's going to end in a draw. And before we go on to the next game, I'll just point out that he killed slightly more units than I did. So it's going to be a 9-11 draw. So I get 9 points, he gets 11. So obviously there were things that I could have done differently there. I was so focused on the objectives, but then in this whole area here, I kind of lost sight of that a little bit and moved the wraiths too far over this way to threaten the ensnarers, when really I could have pushed the zombies onto the hill slightly so that if he charged me, he wouldn't have been able to get within 3 of it, and kept the wraiths on it. And yeah, but that's the thing, you never know if it's going to go to turn 7 or not, because if it had gone to turn 7 and he had successfully got all those charges in on the zombies, then that could have been bad news, and that could have ended up as a loss under those circumstances, because he could have overrun onto that one that was worth 3. But the way I've got it here, I could charge maybe the rear of that unit if they don't look at me, or I could charge someone else on a more valuable objective. So I made some mistakes. I went too far away from this objective. That's the main mistake. The Soul Reavers, I could have used them to do killing, but I think my game plan was sound, thinking that they're more likely to survive a direct bolt thrower hit than anyone else. So although I possibly could have used a different unit for that, I could have maybe used skeletons or maybe my other cavalry unit that aren't so expensive, or wraiths. But again, they've got a chance of just being killed off from a shooting attack. And with the possibility of turn 7 as well, it could end up being 2 rounds of shooting that they have to take. So yeah, maybe not using such an expensive unit to do nothing all game, and then not abandoning the game plan and moving away from the objective. It was a gamble and it did not pay off, so it's a draw. So a win and a draw so far. So if you'd offered me that going into the tournament, I probably would have taken 2 games. It's a pretty solid start. So that's dropped me down the tables a little bit. So I'm not sure which table I'm on right now, actually, because I can't see the number. But I'm probably about mid-table, upper mid-table at the moment. So I'm not anywhere near all the elite players at the moment. Okay, so this time in game 3, this is control, and I'm taking on elves with allied ogres. Now, normally when someone says they've got ogre allies, I think, oh, they've just taken some shooter hordes then. But no, there is no shooters in sight in this ogre army. So with control, the board is divided into 6 2x2 foot squares, and controlling those is worth 1 point. And to control them, it's on unit strength, as everything is now. So a regiment is worth 2, horde is worth 3, troop is worth 1, and a monster or a hero that's not individual is worth 1. Individuals, war machines, worth nothing. So I don't have that many drops, and there's 6 areas that I want to be controlling ideally. If you control the one in the center opposite you, then you get 2 points for that one. So that's the most valuable, getting the center on the other side. it's a very good scenario, I think, for wrangling a result out of not necessarily a poor performance, but wrangling a result out of a battle that didn't go well. You can still position your units in such a way to get a win, even if you haven't wiped the floor with the opponents, if you get them tied up somewhere they don't want to be. So this army that I'm facing here has 2 units of Draken Riders, 1 Draken Lord, which are over there. He's got 2 bolt throwers. He's got a big horde of archers. He's got a small little elfy unit there, spearman or something. He's got 2 ogre, just regular ogre warrior hordes with an ogre standard bearer inspiring them. And he's got I can't remember what they're called. They're like some kind of tree creatures. Let's just have a look in the book, shall we? Because I do actually have that to hand. Let's see what that elf unit's called. I could bring up his actual army list on a web browser, but it would disrupt the screen share because of the delicate nature of Google Hangouts being terrible. So let's have a look. Where are the elves in this book? I'm sure I'll remember what they're called just before I get to the entry in the book. That's typically how it would go. Elves, 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 elves. Where are you? Here we go. So they're not forest chamblers. They are hunters of the wild. I think that's it. Yeah, that'll be it. So they're hunters of the wild, but they just look a bit like trees. They're definitely not forest chamblers, though. Okay, so there's that sorted. The way I've got my setup here, I've got an awful lot of hitting power on this side here. I've got the werewolves, I've got Lykanis, and I've got the soul reavers with wraiths as backup. And I've mainly put those units over here because I don't want them to be shot. And all his shooting is on this side of the table. He's got his 2 bolt throwers in that corner. So I've put targets in his sights that I would want him to shoot with the bolt throwers, like skeletons and zombies. I don't want him shooting at anything else. So the rest of it's hiding behind the woods. And he's got his horde of archers up there as well. And I think they have an item on them, perhaps. So he's also got all his flyers over there. So I need some flying over there to protect myself. So I've got one of my units of Wraiths and the Revenant King on the flying Wyrm over on that side as well. So I think I can just about hold them off. And on this side, I'm hoping to just completely obliterate this section of his army here with this huge wad of meat. Because the woods might be there, but that's not going to hinder my soul reavers at all because of the potion of caterpillar. So if I just dip my toe in there, I can then charge out of those woods unhindered. And of course I could fly over them with the wraiths as long as I can see what I'm charging. And Lykanis and the werewolves are going to position themselves over here. So hopefully they will get unhindered charges off as well. And the zombies and the skeletons are just going to rush forwards, hopefully get shot. And then if they get there, they'll munch on whatever they reach. So there's my plan. I've got my Revenant Cavalry and the Revenant King on horse over there as well for my flank force. So you can see there's the meaty section of the army there. The big hitting part that I'm hoping to just steamroll his right flank or left as I look at it. And over there, there's the slightly less killy area, but it's a sizable flank force. And I'm not hoping to completely annihilate him on this side. I'm hoping to annoy him, go after war machines maybe with the Revenant King, and just hold up his flying units, which are better than my wraiths. But of course they can't be surged, so there's one downside to them. And there's his army, which is I'm not sure how many models are supposed to be in these units, but they are flying. They don't have wings on the actual models though. And over here the ogres and those guys, those hunters of the wild, they're perched on the fence right now. Okay, so first things first. It looks as though he may have made me go first here. I'm not 100% sure, but that's how it looks at the moment. So I've positioned the Revenant King on Wyrm inside the woods and the Wraiths inside the woods so that they can fly out of the woods and attack something next turn. And over here, I'm just pushing these units up down the flank. And over here, again, I've positioned units inside the woods so they can attack out of the woods, even if they end up hindered in some cases. And then when they fly off, the werewolves will be able to get past. And Lykanis is up there because he's more maneuverable, so he was able to get through the gap. He's just staring down this side here. Although actually, no, he's not staring this way because he didn't have enough pivots left, so he's staring down this side, so I'm going to send him round the back of the house in a minute. And here. Okay, so he's moved his Drakens up, his Draken Lord and Draken Riders. He's got one unit. These are all flying, by the way. This unit is facing towards my zombies, which are slightly off screen there, and these two units are facing off with my flank force. So immediately, alarm bells start going off in my head and say he has left an exposed rear there, and Wraiths are surgeable. So if I pivot them, move 10 inches, I've got two potential surge characters here that I could use to get them in. So we'll see if that works out. Everything else of his moves up a little bit. He knows he's going to get charged because I've got the speed edge. So he's just bracing for impact, and he's moved those archers onto the hill to rain fire down on my army. And yes, that's exactly what happens. As I said, I managed to get the Wraiths into the rear of those Draken Riders who carelessly were looking in the other direction, surged them in there, and killed them in one go. So even if he now kills my Wraiths with his Drakens, then it's a good trade because they're more expensive than the Wraiths. And also it means he's not messing with this force I've got going on up here. So you can see that the Revenant King on Wyrm didn't actually charge anyone. It's just moving into position along with the Cavalry, so they're going to be able to charge things next turn. Over here, I went all in with charges. The Wraiths charged into these Ogres, Werewolves in there, and Lykanis moved around the back of the building, so he's not charged anyone, but he's looking into the flank of his force now. And the Soul Reavers, in one go, completely obliterated an Ogre Horde. So that's really bad news for him now, because I'm going to have the choice of flanks, unless he can kill off units and turn around. But he's not going to be able to do that here, because that unit of Hunters of the Wild are wavered after the Werewolf assault. Can't see exactly how much damage they have on them, because he's got these little counters, but that looks like 7. And there's proof that Lykanis was just hiding behind that building, waiting to strike. He does go into the Wraiths with his Draken Riders, and he's going to kill them shortly. And he also sends his Ogre Standard Bearer into my Skeletons and does 6 damage, which is pretty good. I think they'd already taken a bit of damage, actually. I think he shot at them. So my zombies are facing over there. Turn 3. So I go, he killed the Wraiths. Or did he kill the Wraiths? He must have done. Let's see. Then why would he have been facing that way? Okay, I can't remember exactly how that worked out. I think he killed the Wraiths, but if he turned, then maybe he was thinking I could surge the zombies into the flank of the Ogres, which would have been bad news. So instead, he gets flanked by the Soul Reavers, because I don't think the Wraiths survived. Over here, Lykanis joins in for a combo charge on the Hunters of the Wild to try and finish them off. And the Skeletons just go back into the Standard Bearer. And over here, King on the Wyrm charges into the Bolt Thrower. He's probably going to eat that for dinner, and the Revenant Cavalry charge into his character there, who just moved to block them. So they had to charge him, really. There's nothing else they could do. And my zombies, because he left his Draken Riders there, I was able to get a flank charge on them with my zombies, but with the power of Surge. So this elf army is feeling the full effects of the Undead Surge at the moment. I chose not to go after the archers, chose to go for the flyers instead, because for this scenario, if I left them alive, they were going to be quite annoying to deal with, and they would have scored some points, no doubt. So I wanted to get them gone. And you can see Ogres are dead, Hunters of the Wild are dead. So both those combats turned out very well for me. So it's going very well at the moment. And the Soul Reaver is now poised to go after his Archer's Horde, which is not going to end well for them, presumably. Bolt Thrower dead. This guy gets wavered, I think, when the Revenant Cavalry attack him. So that Bolt Thrower is probably going to die next if I choose to do so. And the zombies take a lot of firepower. And they're up to 13 damage. So all the shooting was targeted at the zombies, trying to whittle them down. And they actually get deleted there. So they're dead. So they might have already taken that damage. Let's see, when were the zombies last in a shot? I don't think they've taken it there. So I think he just does put more damage on them after this and then kills them with shooting. So they were gone. Over here, this is going to be a little bit of an annoying fight because there's going to be all this hindrance going on here with the fence. And obviously he only countercharges one of my units at a time, so one of them is always going to be hindered if I want to finish them off. So we'll see how that goes. The Soul Reavers into the flank, 15 damage, but don't even roll high enough to waver them. Oh dear. So, well, the archers aren't going to be able to shoot, so that's one thing, but I would have liked to get them dead and then turn the Soul Reavers to face another threat and move out. So that guy's wavered. The other bolt thrower is dead now, so Revenant King on Undead Wyrm is going to be able to fly off and cause some havoc, but the cavalry is still stuck there. But at least I'll have a unit claiming this top right square. And over here, the Necromancer is just hiding from the Ogre Standard Bearer because he doesn't want to get killed, so he's just running around the woods. And his archers actually run away as fast as they can away from the Soul Reavers. So they're going to get charged in the rear, but they're going to get charged in the rear further away from where I want the Soul Reavers to be, which is probably claiming his central square, which is worth 2 victory points. Over here, his Draken Lord, who kind of abandoned the other side of the board, and he's come over here, and he has gone for the rear of the werewolves, so you would imagine he would kill them. The Soul Reavers do kill off his archers, charging them in the rear, and I don't think the Revenant King helps. I think he just is moving in this direction. Over here, you can see the werewolves do actually get killed by that rear assault. So the Draken Lord has decided to face the other way. He's not worried about Lykanis at all, and Lykanis ends up wavering that unit as a result of that. Over here, I charge that guy again, and I think I waver him again. So they're going to be stuck there. So you can see a nice overview here. So let's see, as far as scoring units, what have I got left? I've got the 2 cavalry units that are worth 2 for scoring purposes because they're both regiments. I've got the Revenant King on Wyrm and Lykanis that are worth 1 point each. He's got the Ogre Standard Bearer who's worth 1. He's got the Draken Lord, which is worth 1. And he's got this regiment of some kind of guard. I think they're spearmen of some kind. Palace Guard, is it? They are worth 2 because they're a regiment. So I've got more scoring units available, but he could actually, if he keeps all his stuff alive, he could end up shenaniganing his way into a draw, potentially, if he plays it well and positions himself, because I've not got that many scoring units. And I think since I went first, he's going to have a chance to jump into other zones last. So there is a way he can work this if all his units survive, where he could potentially get a draw out of it. So my Soul Reaver cavalry move into my own middle section to stop him claiming it, because he's got 2 scoring guys there. So it's just tying it up at the moment, making it a draw. So no one will get points for it to stop him getting 2 for it, because he's not going to kill the Soul Reavers because both those characters are facing the wrong way. So the Soul Reavers are abandoning that section of the board just to deny him taking mine. And Lykanis runs away from that combat to help claim this area with the Revenant King on Wyrm, because that means he would have to use both of his characters to come in here and deny me points for it. And these Revenant Cavalry were held up for the whole game, so they're going to be stuck in the top right claiming that area. So another look at how it is. So let's see, at the moment I've got 1 point there, 2 points for this, so that's 3. He's got 1 for this corner, and this one is a stalemate, this section here. So it's 3-1 to me at the moment, but you can see in his turn 6 he's moving that unit over here. So he's hoping that if there's a turn 7, he can dive into this section and deny me those 2 points. So we'll see how that goes. There's other things he can do as well, because he can position these units and shenanigan them around. So he's still not out of it, and we do get a turn 7. So let's see. Well, the Revenant King on Wyrm decides, you know what, I'm not going to chance it and leave that unit alive. I'm going to dive onto them, kick their butts, risk it, because if he hadn't killed them, he would have been stuck in a zone that he wasn't scoring in, because they would have been worth 2 and he would have been worth 1. So if he hadn't killed them, that would have been a terrible move, but he did kill them. So he's now claiming that table section, which means I'm pretty much guaranteed to win at this point. Soul Reavers are claiming my middle section. They're claiming the top right corner. And his Draken Lord flies into his own central section to contest it with Lykanis. So that means no one gets a point for that. And let's see if we've got an overview. So I get 1 point for my own middle, 1 point for the top right, 1 point for the top left. And he is contesting that one, so that's 0 for both of us. And he holds the bottom left, so it's 3-1 to me. So really, I just had more scoring units left alive. And it was, I think it was fairly convincing battle-wise. We'll get to that in a minute. In terms of the fighting, it was quite one-sided. I killed a lot more than he did, and I ended up winning 18-2 in the tournament scoring. But he did kill quite a bit, and in that scenario, as I was saying earlier, it's entirely possible to shenanigan your way into a draw or a victory, even if you've been out-killed, as long as you have scoring units alive and positioned well. So, at this point, I had this picture taken of me to show that I had moved up to table 2, which I thought was a nice high point, reaching table 2 in a tournament, heading into game 4. This was the final game of day 1. So I thought if I can end with a win here, I'll be right in among the top players going into the final day, which would be quite exciting, considering I had never played with this list once prior to the tournament. And there were certain units that I had never used. I had used Wraiths, but I'd never used 2 of them together. It's been a really long time since I used Revenant Cavalry. So I've never used a list this fast and elite with Undead before. So I'm very proud that I've reached table 2 after the halfway point in the tournament. So, let's have a small drink break here. Okay. So 3 games down, 3 games to go. I told you this was going to be a long one. So, here we go. And I'm against the forces of nature. And the scenario is Eliminate, where a bounty is placed on your 3 most expensive non-individual units. And if they survive the game, you get a victory point. If you kill the opponent's bounty units in close combat, you get 2 victory points. So if you kill them with shooting, you don't get anything, but you do deprive them the survival bonus. And there's also a token that goes in the center of the table, which we hadn't put down yet, which is worth 1 victory point if you claim it at the end of the game. So, very, very interesting scenario, one that I quite like. And the units for me that are going to be bounty holders are going to be the Soul Reaver Cavalry, of course, the Werewolves, and the Undead King, the Revenant King on Undead Wyrm. They're my 3 bounty units, so I don't want them to be killed, or if they do get killed, I don't want it to be in close combat. On the Forces of Nature side, let's have a look. We'll get some close-ups of his army in a second, but you can see my deployment here. I'll go through what he's got momentarily. But there's a big piece of terrain there which kind of divides the battlefield in 2, because there's also this fence here. So I'm thinking if I can park my skeletons on that fence, anyone attacking them, it's an obstacle. So even forces of nature don't like obstacles, so they'll still be hindered fighting over a fence. They can skip through the trees happily, but you erect an artificial fence and they're just tripping over themselves for some reason. So I'm going to put the skeletons on there, and that puts a dividing line down the middle of the table almost. Not quite the middle, because this side's smaller. But I think I've deployed well, because he's got a lot of heavy hitters on this side. And I've put some real meat, heavy-hitting power at both ends. But the werewolves are going to be able to stay out of harm's way, because they're faster than everything he's got. So if I don't want them to get killed, I can avoid it, because they're one of my bounty units. I want him to, if he's going to kill anything, I want it to be the zombies, the skeletons, who are going to be an annoying roadblock there to divide the battlefield in 2, and the Revenant Cavalry. So on this side, where I've gone for the Soul Reavers and the Undead King, or the Revenant King on the Undead Wyrm, and some Wraiths, because he's got one of his bounty units right there. So if I can get a combo charge on them, I want to be able to eat them for breakfast. This side of his army looks weaker than this side, is what I'm saying. So I'm saying if I just push in, take out this side in combat, he's got 2 of his bounty units over here, and the other one is this unit here. So if I take out 2 of them in close combat, and then these 2 units survive, I'm pretty much going to win. And the werewolves, I can just use them to flank if he gets caught up fighting zombies. So there's this flanks action. There's the center of the expendable units. And on this flank, I've got the real meat with the Soul Reavers. I've also got the Revenant King on a horse there as well, because I think I'll want to use him to either give me extra attacks to surge the Wraiths, or to just charge into someone to prevent flank charges when he counters me. So here's what he's got. It's another nicely painted army. This big horde here. Now, I am going to go to the book that this army is found in, which I believe is that the main rule book, the Forces of Nature? Let's have a look. Okay, yes it is. So those are the Naiad Ensnarers, that horde. So they have Ensnare, and they have Regeneration 4+. So much like the Trident Realms unit that was so annoying to me, they could be similar, but they're holding on to one of his bounty tokens, so I think I can kill them in close combat, because they only have defense 3 for a start. So even if I have to make hindered charges on them with certain units, I think I'll take them. He's got another unit behind here that's got a bounty token on it, one of these two. It'll either be, let's see, I'm looking in the book now. The Beast of Nature, it's not that. The Beast of Nature is one of them, though. I think it's that one. So the Beast of Nature, he's put the fly upgrade on it. And this thing here, let's see, what's that? Is that the unicorn? Looking through the list here. I'm not overly familiar with Forces of Nature. That could be Winged Unicorn, which with upgrades could have made that one of his most expensive units as well. So apart from that, he's got lots of elementals, hordes. So they're actually more expensive than the Winged Unicorn. So he must have taken some of the upgrades for it to make it more expensive than them. So he's got elementals there and there. And, oops, wrong way. And over on this side, there's some more elemental. He's got a greater elemental. And these things here, which also have a bounty token on them, let's see if I can remember what they are. He also has the green lady at the back there with her healing prowess. So let's work out what these other units are. He's got, those are probably, those might be Forest Chamblers. They could be. Just looking here. Oh no, those are the, one of them is Naiad Wyrm Riders, I think. Large cavalry. So that looks like this unit here, looking at the base size. That's Wyrm Riders. So they are actually cavalry. And this unit here, I think, is, where's that? That could be Bray Hunters, perhaps? Something like that. Okay, we get the general idea. So there's a big, really tough, beefy unit there carrying a token. So I'm going to have to flank them with something if I want to kill them. And lots of elementals which can be surged. So that's kind of why I wanted to build this dividing line down the middle here. Because I didn't want him to be able to move up and surge around a corner. So I'm going to just park my skeletons in there. And if there's any surging going on, Wraiths, of course, won't be concerned about this because they're flying and surgeable. So I think I will have the surge edge on him. So here we go. Let's get into the game. Turn 1. So he immediately puts damage onto my Wraiths. And I think that's with some kind of lightning bolt. So that says to me immediately, okay, I have to do something with these Wraiths now, because if they take another hit like that, they could just pop, because they don't have very high nerve. They're only nerve 12. So a couple of good hits on them and they die. So you can see we've taken the trees out here just so it's easy to move. And I've moved up and I'm kind of, it's a bit of a pincer I'm going for here. You'll see that I've also, is he in the shot? The Revenant King on Undead Wyrm is looking into their flank there, which is a move that is pretty solid, I think. Okay, on this side, Lykanis and the Wraiths are going up this way, round the flank. The Werewolves are just poised to strike because he doesn't have too much that's fast apart from that unit. So I'm staying out of their range, and the Werewolves are faster than them anyway. I don't care if he charges these units, though. You can see the Wraiths there backing up Lykanis. What I want to do is get into his flank with them. Turn 2. So here's how it looks in turn 2. I've moved Lykanis right behind his lines. The Wraiths have moved into the woods, so they could either charge out of it or move out of it and then be surged. I've pushed the skeletons up onto the fence. The zombies have moved right into his face as well, and the werewolves have moved out of sight so that he can't charge them. But if they charge the zombies, then the werewolves will have line of sight to them. So he has to decide whether he wants to eat that zombie legion and take potential charges, because even if he kills them and pivots on the spot, then he runs the risk of becoming really congested in there. And I do have lots of surging capabilities with other units around that are surgible, like these wraiths. So he still has to be careful even if he wipes them out. Over on that side, you can see these wraiths, before they got killed, I decided to charge them into his elementals there, because otherwise they would have just been killed from shooting, probably. You can see that my undead Wyrm with Revenant King has flown over the hill, so he's having to turn his flank even more if he wants to avoid being flank charged by him. And you can see I've got a token resting on his face there to show that he's a bounty unit. So you can have a good look at this now. So he's got a choice to make about how badly he wants to kill that zombie unit and whether he wants to risk, because it's obviously a trap. It's a risk, but if he thinks he can kill the unit, then it may be worth it. If he thinks that he may not roll high enough to kill it, and it's inspired as well, so there's always the chance of double wanting, which would be absolutely disastrous for him, because it would mean I could get flank charges with the werewolves and maybe rear charges with the wraiths with surging. Over here you can see that charge that I went for, just to hold them up, those elementals, because I want to set up some charges. I want the Soul Reavers to charge his ensnarers in the front. I'll be hitting on 4s, but with him there as well, maybe I can get some decent damage on them, and he can maybe charge the flank. So, and this cavalry unit, I'm going to be able to surge them as well. So even though I couldn't charge the elementals, because I was looking into their flank and could only reach the front, with surging I'll be able to get them in. And I've got the surge power right here with the Revenant King. So we're on to turn 3 now. I know some of the pictures had 3 on them, but that's just because we'd already turned over the dice. So in turn 3, he goes for the triple charge onto the zombie legion with these 3 beefy units here, including the greater elemental, and the other elementals go into the skeletons on the fence, so they're going to be hindered. So I'm confident the skeletons are going to survive. Not so confident about the zombies, but they could do, and even if they don't survive, then they've done their job and they've brought his units into this big mess here where there's going to be so much congestion. I'm hopefully going to be able to dance rings around him with wraiths and the werewolves and Lykanis. And they do delete the legion in one go. Just tons of damage output by those units, and they're gone. He also kills off the wraiths with the countercharge of these elementals, but I wanted the wraiths to do something before they died, and this unit of elementals could have been potentially surged into someone if I didn't just park in front of them that turn. So over here, he charges his Beast of Nature into the Revenant King on Wyrm, and in a stand-up fight, I'm going to win that eventually, because I'm going to be life-leeching wounds as well, but he's taken 3 there. And then over here, you can see how he manages to position his units after this fight. So he pivots these guys around to face this threat. So he's only going to be front charged by these 2 units if they want to get him. And I'm not sure whether he's finished his pivoting and stuff there. I'm going to assume he has, because that's how the picture is. So he wants them to be looking forwards. They're his loot carrying unit, or his bounty carrying unit, should I say. And they're really wedged in there. So hopefully sacrificing the zombie unit pays off, and I've got them pinned down sufficiently, because the skeletons aren't going anywhere yet. They've only taken 4 damage, and they're on a fence, so they're okay for the moment. Over here, the Soul Reavers go straight into his ensnarers, do 14 damage, but I can only waver them, which is okay because they're not going to be able to hit me back. But they do have regen, so they could potentially get a lot of those wounds back. But I'm confident I'm going to kill them next turn still. Over here, I need to put 1 damage on that thing with the Revenant King, but he does life leech wound back, so eventually I'm going to win that fight, probably. Over here, I surge the Revenant Cavalry into his elementals, because I don't want my Soul Reavers to get flanked by them. So these guys are just the sacrificial wolves, as it were, and sacrificial corpse cart. So I couldn't charge into the flank, as I said, so I had to move into the front and then surge into the front. Over here, you can see there's more repositioning going on. But you'll notice one of his units is dead. The unit that was right there, the one that's not the Wyrm Riders, the other unit is dead. That's because I flew the Wraiths over behind or alongside them, pivoted them, and then there was a gap between his units that the Necromancer could see through to surge them into the flank, Werewolves in the front, and that was enough to kill that unit utterly. And the Skeletons they're doing all right in this fight, aren't they? Because they life leeched a wound back when they struck at the elementals there. And Lykanis has gone in there as well. So I'm assuming Lykanis did at least 2. He'll have done 2 of those wounds probably. The Skeletons are likely to have only done 1. And you can see here that after this combat, the Werewolves backed up D3 inches and the Wraiths pivoted on the spot, which is going to prevent these very powerful Wyrm Riders from pivoting and charging the Werewolves, because they're not nimble. So they're only going to be allowed 1 pivot on their charge. And if they pivot clear of this unit of Wraiths, then they don't have enough space to make it into the Werewolves. So it's lucky that they backed them up sufficiently. I'm not sure how many inches it was, but I think the only thing the Wraiths could do really was pivot just to stop the Werewolves being charged, because in this scenario the Werewolves are very valuable with that bounty token on them, because I think I'm going to take some of his tokens very soon. Here's a nice overview. You can see I think I've got him pretty much where I want him. I've killed one of his units. He's killed one of my Wraith units, but his Ensnarers are in really tricky situation here. They're going to get killed by the Soul Reavers eventually, and then the Soul Reavers are going to be free to run wild. I just hope it's before the Revenant Cavalry get killed so I don't get flanked. And if the Revenant Cavalry are still alive as well, then I'll be able to use the Soul Reavers to help out in this combat maybe, because the Revenant King is not having the most success at killing that thing quickly. Okay, turn 4. Look at all those wounds that come back. What did I have them up to? Like 15, and they've got themselves down to 6 wounds with regen. And then they get them to 4 with healing as well. So they're only taken 4 wounds now. But with 4 damage on them, they're not going to be able to hit the Soul Reavers, so the Soul Reavers will keep their Thunderous Charge. So when I hit them again, with that bonus of 4 damage that's already on them, and I'm already plotting how I can make that even more potent, then we'll see whether I can take them out. The Elementals waver Lykanis, so he's really just in their way, preventing them helping out in reaching what he really wants to kill, which is the Werewolves. And he has to charge the Wraiths with these Wyrm Riders, because the Werewolves, as we established, couldn't be charged because the Wraiths were in the way. So he charged them, he did 6 damage, which isn't enough for him. He couldn't roll high enough to remove them. So that's going to be bad news for him, because he's probably going to get double charged. And maybe I can get some kind of shenanigans for a flank charge with the Wraiths, maybe. I'm not going to be able to fly over his head because they've taken damage. So that's one thing he doesn't have to worry about. I like how these Wraiths look in pictures, actually. It's very easy. It's just a load of dry brushing, but I think they actually look good. And yes, he does face the double charge. I couldn't find a way to get the Necromancer to see the Wraiths if the Werewolves charged in first. So I had to do the double charge because the Necromancer couldn't move far enough. Hello to Bazooka J Rambo in the chat. So I had to just go for the double charge in the front, 12 damage, and I wavered them, which is enough because they're not going to be able to countercharge the precious, precious Werewolves, and I'll probably get them next turn, when in fact I'll even be able to use the Wraiths to get an even more deadly charge on them, maybe a flank, because I'll be able to reposition them. And here the Skeletons, who are just getting wounds back left and right because the Elementals abandoned them, so they're now fighting the Greater Elemental. So the Skeletons are being a nuisance to him as well. Over here, in this war of attrition between Elementals and Revenant Cavalry, he's going to win because he can heal up those wounds with the character he's got there. So war of attrition, he's going to win it, especially since the Revenant Cavalry only have Thunderous Charge. They're going to be losing most of their attacking power every time they take damage. Over here, you can see I'm slowly racking up damage on this beast. So the Revenant King on Wyrm is going to be able to get back into the fight eventually. And he manages to either heal or regen some wounds onto his Wyrm Riders. So they've only taken 5 now, but they're still wavered, so they are still in trouble. And that is to show that Lykanis was killed by the elementals, I think, that shot there. So he held them up a turn longer than he maybe should have done. Over here, you can see, first of all, I'll talk about what I managed to do. So my Soul Reavers and the Revenant King charged together into the Ensnarers, who were on 4 damage after regenning and healing most of the damage I did last time. And the amount of damage I put into them this time was high enough so I could remove them, which was lucky because the elementals killed off my Revenant Cavalry in this turn and turned to face me. So I needed the ability to do something to them. And I'm now free. I'm not constrained by those Ensnarers being in front of me. You can see that the Soul Reavers turned to face the Beast of Nature behind, and he has jumped his Unicorn, who I think is carrying one of his bounty tokens, maybe, into this area here. Over here, and I managed to kill his Wyrm Riders. So the fact that they ended up... let me see, was I able to get the Wraiths surged into them, or did I have to settle for 2 frontal charges? I'm not sure. Either way, the Wraiths and the Werewolves combined to charge the Wyrm Riders again, and with the damage that had already been inflicted on them, it was enough to kill them, so they're dead. I've now killed 2 of his bounty-carrying units in close combat, which has given me 4 victory points, and it's also denied him getting 2 survival victory points. None of my bounty-carrying units are dead yet. So it's looking bad for him at this stage, scenario-wise. Even though he has killed some expensive units, like the Zombie Legion and the Revenant Cavalry, they're not that cheap. But scenario-wise, he's looking a bit out of it at the moment. Skeletons are still alive. They're doing really well. So we're getting to the end of the game. So I decide I'm just going to run away with my Soul Reaver Cavalry, because his elementals are free. I don't want him to be able to attack me. So I run right into the corner of the table, and that's where they're going to sit. So his elementals are going to have to turn around, walk this way again, and then with the surge capabilities he has, he would have to roll 100% successes on his surge roll to make it into those guys next turn. And the Revenant King on Wyrm, he's going to do something as well in a moment. We're on to turn 6 now. I just didn't want the Soul Reavers to turn around on the spot and face a full charge from the elementals and risk dying and throwing the game away, potentially. That would be silly. So, turn 6. And he charges the werewolves with his elementals. He puts probably 5 damage on them, because I imagine I will have life leeched one back. And I managed to get the wraiths behind them and surge them into the rear. So we put a fair bit of damage on there, but not enough to kill them. The skeletons are still hanging in there against the greater elemental. And he has turned this beast around to face the Soul Reavers, so he could potentially attack them if there's a turn 7. And the elementals are looking that way as well because they want to kill them. The Revenant King on Wyrm has flown off over here to preserve his bounty token. And the Revenant King put some damage onto the Unicorn beastie, I think. So that's going to stop him flying next turn, if there is one. So as I said, if there's a turn 7, he needs to move his full and have 100% surge success with the elementals to reach the Soul Reavers. And that's still no guarantee he would actually kill them. And the game ends there because I rolled a 2. So that's a big scenario win for me. I've got 4 points for killing 2 of his bounty units in melee. I've got 3 points for my 3 bounty units all surviving. So there's 7 points to me. He has picked up 1 point for one of his bounty units being alive, and no one is claiming the central area because we've both got units lingering around there. So it's 7-1 to me in the victory points, which you would think would surely mean a big juicy win, but in fact we killed roughly the same amount of points as each other, so it's actually a 15-5 win. One of my minor gripes with tournaments is that I feel they favour killing too much. I think it should be pretty much 100% scenario, and how much you kill should just affect it should affect your position in the case of ties. I look at it from a perspective of, if we imagine professional sports, generally how much you beat someone by doesn't affect the league table that much. It's mostly about just winning. There's a set number of points for winning usually. And then in the case of ties, that's usually broken by how many points you scored or how you did against the person that you tied with and that kind of thing. But I know there are people out there that would rather Kings of War was 100% how much you've killed and absolutely nothing to do with the scenarios. So there is a balance to be struck. I'm just a very scenario-heavy person when it comes to how I like to play games. I like there to be a set objective and not for it to be just about killing. So it's 15-5 win. And the player I actually defeated with that Forces of Nature army is very highly ranked and highly regarded. He won a tournament recently. So I'm proud of that win. That's a good one. So at the moment, I'm on 3 wins and a draw. So I'm currently sitting at about 4th, I think, in the standings because one of my wins, well, 2 of my wins weren't big. They were just pretty standard wins. And one of my wins was big. And the draw was very close as well. So there are people above me that have had several really big wins, which is why I'm not higher in the table with that record at the moment. So we're on to day 2, and I've come up against Abyssal Dwarves. Abyssal Dwarves, some would argue, are punching above the race's weight. Some people say they're underpowered. I don't have a particular opinion one way or the other on them. Previous to this game, I'd only played them twice, and I had won one of those and drawn one. So undefeated against them going into this game. But of course, we're on the top tables now. Still on table 2, as you can see. So this is obviously an elite player, another highly ranked player here. And the list that I'm up against was one of the ones I was hoping to avoid because it has 2 heavy mortars. And if they hit, they have d6 plus 4 damage. It's vicious damage as well. And it's piercing 4, I think. So anything of mine, he's going to be wounding it on 2s and re-rolling the 1s. So he could, with 1 hit, wipe out my Werewolves, my Soul Reaver Cavalry, my Revenant Cavalry, either of the Wraith units. All my elite units can be destroyed in potentially 1 go from those mortars. So my deployment has that very much in mind here. The scenario this is the push scenario, which again I feel doesn't favour my army at all, because I've got only 2 units that won't be slowed down if they carry tokens, whereas Abyssal Dwarves have a lot of very slow infantry that can carry the tokens quite happily. I also can't surge units that are carrying tokens, so if I want to do any surging, I will have to drop the tokens first. So I put both of my push counters onto the zombies. I don't put one on the skeletons because I'm confident they're going to get killed, and looking at where he's put his tokens as well, he had all his infantry over at this side. So I'm thinking that he's definitely going to put his tokens on them. He's not going to put it on his faster units on this flank here. So I just want all the tokens to be on this half of the table. And then if I can just hold up the more heavy-hitting fast flank of his army on this side with my kind of expendable units, which is why I've got skeletons, Revenant Cavalry, a troop of Wraiths over there for speed, just to hold them up and avoid them getting anywhere near the tokens, which are going to be all in the middle, because I've got all of them on my zombies, all of his are on infantry, and there's the extra token in the center as well. So I'm hoping if all the tokens are over here, then I will have the edge, hopefully, because I've got lots of units around that could potentially pick them up at the end. I've got the Soul Reaver Cavalry, maybe, I've got the Werewolves, Lykanis, and I've also got the Revenant King on Undead Wyrm, who is right at this edge over here, but he's actually hiding behind a rock to avoid the line of sight of the mortars, which is why the Soul Reavers are behind the woods as well, because I don't want them being shot with mortars in turn 1. Let's see. Okay, so you're just having a nice look at my setup here. So I'm not concerned about skeletons being shot. They're totally in the open. And I think his mortars are not quite facing this way anyway. Soul Reavers behind the woods. Zombies with 2 tokens on them. And look, the way I've got the Revenant King on Wyrm there, I just don't want him being shot in turn 1. That's the only reason he's hiding. Okay, here's his army. So let's get out the rule book so I can possibly give you the correct names of these units that he's got here. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory. So I think the big unit is that Black Souls or Immortal Guard? I think they're actually quite similar anyway. So he's got a horde. It must be Black Souls because you can't take hordes of Immortal Guard. So it's a horde of Black Souls and 2 units of Immortal Guard, I think, there. So the Immortal Guard are the more elite ones that are better at killing you. So those, he's got, where has he got his tokens? He's got one on each of the small units, I think. Or is that a horde there? That might be a horde of, is that a horde of, oh no, this is slave orcs, that's right. That's slave orcs, that's a horde of black souls. There's the Immortal Guard, and there's the other Immortal Guard. Okay, yeah, that's right. So slave orcs, Immortal Guard, black souls, Immortal Guard, half-breeds, gargoyles, mortars. I think, is that 2 units of half-breeds he's got, or is it something else? I'm just having a quick look here. Some of them are grotesques, actually. The half-breeds are there, and the big ones, I think, will be the grotesques, yeah, because they're large cavalry. And that guy there, that character, he is going to be half-breed champion. Is he? Oh, grotesque champion, yeah, that's it. So he's the grotesque champion, and he's also got Basusu, I think he's called. Let's see, yeah, Basusu the Vile, who is like, he's pretty much a vampire. He's very, very similar to a vampire, and he only inspires gargoyles. So I'm a bit worried about him. When I was looking at the list, he was something I was concerned about, because his hitting power, he could also potentially kill one of my elite units if he rolls well. Okay, turn 1. So you see I was already taking pictures as he was moving his units up, so he seemed to go first. I think I let him go first, even though he's going to shoot off those mortars. He didn't have anything else in range, so I thought I'd risk giving him turn 1, and then I would have the ability to snatch tokens and put them into his half. So the way the scoring works in this is that if you own a token, you get a point, and if you have it in your opponent's half, then it's worth 2 points. So it may be risky letting him go first and contesting the fight more towards my half than his, but we'll see how that works out. So he's moved up his units here out of my charge range. I think he may have left himself in charge range of the Wraiths, but he's not worried about that at all. Over here, he's just pushed up as fast as he can because he doesn't have the speed edge at all here. My army's very fast, his is very slow, especially on this flank. There's Basusu, I think, running around there. And with my turn, I move up the skeletons onto the hill. They're really just bait at this stage. They want to tie up one of his units, maybe for 2 turns, and then if something gets stuck there, I could maybe surge the Revenant cavalry into their flank, perhaps, with the Revenant King, who's just chilling there behind the Wraiths. And this was actually a mistake. It was just poor calculation on my part, because I looked across the table at Basusu, and I didn't realize, because I moved the Necromancer behind the zombies, and then I surged them forward. I didn't realize that by surging them, I would actually be pushing them out of position to block line of sight. So Basusu was able to see the Necromancer because I surged them like 7 inches out of 8, something obscene like that. So he was able to charge the Necromancer. So a mistake there from me, and the Necromancer is going to be gobbled up handily for that mistake. Over on this side, the Werewolves and Lykanis are just poised to strike, and so is the Revenant King on Wyrm and the Wraiths. I've got the definitive speed advantage, so he's just walking into potential death. He is going to walk forwards, though. And you can see, oh, some professional measuring going on there. I think he's trying to make sure he's not in charge range of the Soul Reavers there. That would be something sensible for him to do, because my Soul Reavers do have the Potion of the Caterpillar, so they will ignore any of this terrain that's in the way. Looks like some werewolves on the other table there. Turn 2. So, yes, he's going to kill that Necromancer. And he's moved up behind this fence, so I'm going to have a hindered charge on him if I charge with whatever I feel like. But that is a unit that's carrying a token. The Black Soul Horde. So the zombies take 10 damage from throwing Mastiffs. Mutated Abyssal Dwarf throwing Mastiffs. He's got 3 units that have them, and he rolled quite well for one of them that racked up most of this damage. One of them was quite bad, one of them was average. So they re-roll the damage roll. So against zombies, that's pretty damn good. So 10 damage racked up just from dwarves throwing dogs at them, basically. Over here, there's not that much to report except the fact that my Wraiths have moved. They're no longer sitting there. And you'll see where they've gone in a moment. Okay, so I've positioned the Wraiths to look at Basusu, and the Revenant King is hiding from him, so he can't be charged by him. If Basusu wants to maybe charge the Wraiths, then he can. That's not that big of a loss for me. And then I could always charge him with the Revenant King and put 1 damage on him next turn and stop him flying. So he's a big points investment, so I'll be interested to see what he wants to do with that next. My Soul Reavers have moved up into position, and they're going to hopefully strike in a minute. They're out of sight of his units on the other side of these woods up here. I positioned them so that he wouldn't be able to get charges on me. And I went all in over here. So triple charge, Werewolves, Lykanis, and the King on Wyrm, all into the Slave Orcs. That's 15 damage on them, and I waver that unit. The zombies go straight into the Immortal Guard unit there, and they waver them as well. Oh, no, they don't. That is that a token or is that waver? No, it's just a token. So they haven't wavered them because they've only got 1. I actually take away this waver token in a minute because it was getting too confusing to decide whether they were wavered or they had tokens on them, because we actually use the red tokens for the loots, basically. Apart from that blue one. So they're not wavered. But the Slave Orcs are, so they're going to die very shortly next turn. And that also means I don't need to charge everything into them next time. So maybe the Flying Wyrm will be able to just fly over them. Over here, the Wraiths also went in. I wasn't expecting them to do any damage. I just charged them into this Black Soul Horde because I didn't want them to flank my zombies. That was the only reason for that. Laying down their lives, pretty much. Turn 3, he moves his gargoyles to block my Soul Reaver Cavalry, so I'm going to have no choice but to exclusively charge them and not any of the other juicier targets, which then allows him to set up a few things, which we'll get to in a moment. So over here, he countercharges with the Immortal Guard there, and he doesn't do too much to the zombies. I'm not sure if he's done anything yet. Might be pre-damage, this picture. Yes, it is, because Basusu went into the rear of the Wraiths, so he's probably going to assist in killing them off. But they've done their job. They've stopped the zombies being flank charged for a turn. And the zombies are carrying my tokens, of course. And then look at this. So the Slave Orcs are dead. I charged in Lykanis and the Werewolves into them again, killed them off. The zombies charged into the Immortal Guard unit they were fighting, and they just killed them. Even though they'd only put 1 damage on them previously, they just had a much better roll this time. And they are dead now, so both those units died. So the zombies, prior to that attack, actually dropped their tokens behind them as well. And then when they killed the Immortal Guard, they took their token, which is why there's 2 tokens on the floor. And they've just got 1 that they picked up. I dropped them because they're on so much damage by this point after taking the counter charge that I knew they were going to die soon, and I didn't want whatever killed them to pick up those 2 juicy tokens because they're far too juicy. So Lykanis overran over there, Werewolves facing that way, and the Revenant King on Wyrm is somewhere up above here. There might be a picture of him in a moment. So you can see how he set up his units so that when I attack the gargoyles, he would be able to then counter-strike at my Soul Reavers. The Soul Reavers do kill the gargoyles, and I sent my Wraiths into this bad boy, this champion, but I don't think they actually do any damage to him. I had to actually land them just outside the woods and then surge into him to avoid being hindered, but I don't think they did too much either way. Turn 4. So he goes into the zombies with the Black Soul Horde. He wants that juicy token that's on them. He wants them dead regardless. And then a triple charge into the Soul Reavers. Most of it is hindered though, so I'm not too worried. I'm slightly concerned because I've not got Inspiring nearby, but they've got a chance of surviving even though it's a triple charge just because everything's so hindered. I'm not sure whether he is, but the rest certainly are. And over here, the skeletons are dead. He'd charged in and killed the skeletons because the skeletons had pushed a bit further onto the hill. And he killed them and then backed away, which means I'm not going to be able to go and attack him, but I don't really want to because I want to engage in this fight here and just hopefully leave them alone. And look at this. Ton of damage on the zombies, but he double ones them. Wow. So double 1 zombies, bad news for the Abyssal Dwarves. That means I'm going to have one more go of 40 attacks with the zombies before they inevitably die. You can't account for that. By the way, his mortars have missed in every single turn so far. He hasn't scored a single hit yet on a 5+. So chances are each time, on average, it won't hit, but you would think eventually it would. Over the course of a game, you'd expect a few hits out of 2 mortars. He also double 1s the Soul Reavers, but he needed higher anyway, so it's just comedy that he just happened to roll 2 double 1s for nerve in a row, even though this one isn't that crazy, because he needed higher anyway. If he did 8 damage, he would have needed 7 to waver them, so it's not that stupendous. But the fact he hasn't killed that unit despite the triple charge means that he's left flanks and rears and all sorts exposed, so I'm going to take advantage of that in a moment. And you can see here that I flanked this unit with the Revenant Cavalry and the Wraiths. And I did a fair bit of damage, but I could only waver them. So when it was their turn, they just turned to face, I think. And then over here, when the Soul Reavers hit at this unit here, put some damage on, life bleached some back, but they're still probably going to die next time there's any fighting going on. And up here, the werewolves and the zombies double charge his horde, quite a bit of damage, and waver them. So the zombies being alive came back to bite him. That double 1, very, very tasty timing for me there. And up here, Basusu, who was actually fighting the Revenant King on a Wyrm, I don't think there was a picture of it, he goes into the zombies now. Lykanis is still just running off over there towards the mortars. Over here, these guys are going to be able to have a charge on them at some point. Turn 5. So the zombies are gone. Basusu with his 8 attacks, he only needed to put 1 damage on them because they were already over the nerve threshold, I think. So they died. He couldn't roll the double 1 again. And here the Soul Reavers are dead as well. As expected, they lost it this turn, being charged by the Immortal Guard and the champion here, the Grotesque champion. And he got a charge in the flank with that unit of half-breeds into the Revenant Cavalry, but he double 1'd them as well. 18 damage, double 1. That's also probably going to come back and bite him. It's just holding him up. So there's been 2 double 1s and one that was kind of a double 1, but it's not a funny one because he probably wouldn't have killed the unit anyway. So 2 really bad double 1s for him, and his artillery still haven't hit once. So the Revenant Cavalry are going to be able to have one more go at attacking before they die as well. And they are going to combo charge this unit here, and I think that's the extra damage they put on. So they're getting close to death. Over here, you can see that the Revenant King on Wyrm has just flown over here and landed on these 2 tokens and picked them up. Because I'm just thinking scenario now. We're getting towards the end of the game. I need to pick up the tokens and get them into his half, if possible. Because only Basusu and the mortars have got killing power around here, and they can't kill everything, so I'm going to send the werewolves onto that one as well. So there's confirmation that he's picked up those 2. The werewolves might not be able to pick that up, it depends. In the chat, we've got Paul Welsh. He was at the tournament, by the way. We've got PDV Gyrio, who says hi. And Dreddy is in here now and says, is this that Warhammer game the kids play these days? No, it's not. You know full well this is Kings of War. You can see that the champion has picked up one of the tokens here, and he is marching it into my half at the moment. He might already be in my half with it, so that's what's inspired me to get a move on with the tokens. He's also going to pick that one up with the Immortal Guard as well, no doubt. Okay, so the Revenant Cavalry finally die at the second time of asking. But I think let me go back. I think I may have wavered this unit when I double charged them a minute ago. So that's why they don't attack anyone next turn. We didn't put a token on them though because it was getting too confusing with the loot tokens being red as well. So the loot tokens currently, there's 2 on him. There's 1 on the werewolves. There is 1 on this Grotesque champion. And there was 1 on this unit of Immortal Guard. But they're not there anymore. That's because my Wraiths, the gap between let's have a look if we've got a shot of it. You see that gap there? Turns out that gap is just big enough for wraiths who haven't been damaged last turn to fly over the top of the grotesques, land there, and then the Revenant King parks himself there and surges them into the rear. So it's hindered, but 30 attacks into the rear of the Immortal Guard. So they're dead. The wraiths steal their loot, overrun into the opponent's half, and you can see Lykanis chewing through the mortars there, who still haven't landed a hit. So his powerful fighting units facing away from all the markers. So the game plan is kind of working. I needed good fortune to beat this list, because if the mortars hit, it can be game over very quickly. So I needed them to have a bad game, and they did. They didn't actually hit anything. And of course, he had some double ones, which slowed down his units getting into the fight over here and also allowed me to do more with the zombies than I should have been able to. So he's got 1 token in my half. I've got 4 in his half. And that's the end of the game. We don't get a turn 7. So in terms of points, he gets 2 and I get 8. So another massive scenario win in terms of victory points. But in tournament scoring, it's just a straight win or loss and then how much he killed. So he killed slightly more than me, not that much. So it was a 14-6 win, which is another 14-6 win. I also had 14-6 in my first game as well. So winning that game is going to put me on the top table going into the final game of the tournament. So I'm in basically second place right now, going into the final game. However, the player above me in the league table, I think he was 18 points ahead of me, and he has a far superior attrition score, which is how many kills he did. So for me to win the tournament, I would have to beat him 20-0, which isn't very likely. And there are also a pack of wild, hungry hounds just below me on the leaderboard who don't have that many points less than me. So if I get absolutely annihilated, they're ready to jump above me and send me back down to mid-table mediocrity. So it's kind of a blessing being on the top table, and also a curse, because this list and player I was about to come up against has basically annihilated everyone so far. On table 1 in the previous game, he had killed another undead list, and I think he won that one like 18-2 or 19-1 or something. So a big win over another undead army. And this is going to be the dominate scenario. And his entire army benefits from being close together, because he's got the battle shrine, which puts rallying onto units nearby, so giving them higher nerve. So dominate, of course, you want to be close together. So it's like the nightmare scenario to be facing this army. He's got 3 volley guns. He's got 2 units of what they called honor guard, I think, which are the really powerful, really potent cavalry unit of the League of Rordia. If you couldn't tell it was League of Rordia, I'm not sure whether there are any actual halflings in there, but there are some dogs of war in there, which are like pikemen that have ensnare, defense 5, and they're just nasty. He's got a halfling iron beast, which is just a steam tank pretty much. So the 2 honor guard units, he's got one that's nimble up there with an upgrade, and he's got one with a tree on it that represents the fact that they have the caterpillar potion. So it's a really powerful, compact list. And when I was looking through, it was one of the lists, again, I didn't want to come up against because of those volley guns mainly. I think they could potentially chew through my army. So I have a choice at this stage. Do I, A, play really conservatively, essentially hide, and then maybe try and strike at the end of the game, and maybe get a draw, and cement my place in the top 4 positions or something like that? Or do I just go all out and legitimately do the best I can to try and win this game 20-0 and maybe actually win the tournament? And the whole reason we come to tournaments is to test our mettle against the players that are really good and bring really potent lists, and see how our wits and our list building stacks up against the other players. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to try and win this game. I'm going to try and just wipe him off the table and win the tournament. I have to kill virtually everything he's got and lose almost nothing, but I'm going to try it. So we'll see what happens. And then if I go down in a blaze of glory and drop a few places in the rankings because people overtook me because I just get totally whooped, then so be it. But I'm going for it, going for a 20-0. So with my setup, you can see in the wide shot here, that it's dominate, of course, so it's not on points anymore though. So a skeleton regiment is worth the same as a soul reaver regiment if it's in the middle at the end of the game, which is an interesting thing to think about. So what I want to do here, I've got my meaty flanks, werewolves and revenant cav on this flank, and soul reaver cavalry on the other flank. I've also got the Revenant King on Wyrm on this left-hand side. So he's going to fly up and threaten the flank as well. And then I'm just sending the expendable units into the middle to hold him up, and then maybe if I can roll the flanks and come in and crush with a pincer motion. The war machines are, as the internet memes might say, they're doing me a frighten at the moment. So we'll see how they do. Let's see. So you can see turn 1, when I start taking pictures, he's already well into his movement. This player, by the way, he may be the fastest player that I've ever come up against. It's like he's definitely not being paid by the hour, let's say that. So as soon as his turn starts, he already knows everything he's going to do. He's got it all planned out in his head already. So his whole movement phase takes less than a minute usually. He already knows exactly what he's going to do. So that's obviously the sign of someone who is thinking ahead, like a chess master. So you can see the Revenant King on Wyrm is pointing into his flank now, just being threatening. And really, I'm not hoping to actually attack yet. But if we look at the wide setup here, he's got 2 war machines there, which I can stare at. And if he wants to protect them, he's going to have to make valuable units look in this direction, which may allow me to open up some flank charges, hopefully. So we'll see if he falls for that old tactic. And I've moved Wraiths behind this house, so they're not going to get volley gunned to death, because I think they're the prime targets for volley guns. Their nerve isn't very high, so you only need a few wounds to potentially remove them. And of course, they have such high defense that the piercing the volley gun grants is a good way to kill them. The other Wraiths are hiding behind these woods, which isn't bad for Wraiths because they can always fly out of the woods and then be surged into a unit. His Dogs of War, which are the most tough unit to crack because of the ensnare and the high defense, they're sitting right in the middle, and they're protecting their flank with woods. So even if I charge them with Revenant cavalry into the flank, then they'd lose their thunderous charge through being hindered. So if I'm going to attack them with anything, I want it to be the werewolves, because they have they have the least to lose if they are hindered, because they don't have thunderous charge to worry about losing. So it's really only going to be -1 to hit for the werewolves, and they already hit on 3s, so hitting on 4s, it's not that scary. So I want the werewolves to be part of that attack when I eventually go into the Dogs of War, but I want it to be a combo charge as well. Dreddy says someone stole all the trees. Yes, the trees are removed to make things easier on this table. I think they'd been removed since the last game, and then they just never got put back. So I'm moving my Soul Reavers up, and my Revenant King. He is going to make a beeline for that organ gun, or that volley gun, should I say, because if that lives, it's probably going to try and shoot the Soul Reavers, since they're going to have to be in the open to actually attack him. So Revenant King is going to attack the volley gun, and hopefully kill it in one go. Staring down the flank, and he's moving up his forces here. He's keeping those honor guard behind the hill because they're actually height 3, so they can see over this hill. And you can see that arcs of sight are being worked out here. It's a game of cat and mouse at the moment. He's not committing too far forward, but he has no reason to, because I'm coming forwards and he's got guns and I don't. And you can see he's actually positioned some very expensive units here facing over to this flank where the Revenant King is. So he's doing his job distracting them. And you can see the way his line is shaping up here. Turn 2. Okay, the Revenant King again is moving into another angle to strike, staying out of either the charge arc or the charge range of these units. He doesn't want to just get himself killed. He just wants to be annoying, really. And he's already had to move the volley guns once so far. And the Revenant King on horse goes into the organ gun. He does 7 damage, but can't actually kill it, unfortunately. Wait, that can't be 7 damage. Oh yeah, it can, because he triples his attacks. So 7 damage, and then he gets charged by the honor guard over the hill. So he attacks it. It stops it shooting, but I really wanted to kill that because he's probably going to get killed. So I thought it was a decent trade to get rid of the volley gun, but it's alive, so that's not good. He parks the Iron Beast in front of the Soul Reavers, so I'm going to have to charge it, which is going to be tough to crack. I think it's defense 6, that thing. It's got high nerve, but I'm going to give it a good go. In the center, I've pushed the zombies and the skeletons up. Then you can see here, I'm trying to set up his Dogs of War for a flank attack. I'm going to be hindered, but still, if I can get it, then I'll take it. I really need a big, juicy triple or quadruple charge on them to take them down in one go, and that would really open the game up for me. But he's not going to give me that opportunity because he's protecting his flanks with the woods and such. He's going to get killed in a minute, by the way, if you're wondering. So, yep, it's just all very cagey at the moment, just moving into position, ready to just charge in, hopefully smash face, and then turn to face something else that's a threat. Not much death yet. You can see from the other angle here. Okay, so Revenant King dies. So I would have liked him to have killed the organ gun, but what can you do? He's dead. And I had a slight brainwave. PDV Gyro says, your opponent seems already surrounded. Yes, but that's not outside of his game plan, because he wants to be compact. So I don't think he's overly concerned by being surrounded. And let's see, where was I? So here, I decided, instead of just charging into this unit and being all hindered and in the woods, I'd take out the volley guns instead. So I sent Lykanis into a volley gun, I sent the Revenant Cavalry, hindered through the woods into a volley gun, but so many attacks that I just killed those two volley guns, and that's one big threat totally gone. And the fact that I killed them meant I'm not going to get flank charged by anyone because I can turn to face the enemy. So I've got 3 units staring into his flank on this side now. So I think I've done pretty well to get that set up. And there's the Revenant King staring in there. The Wraiths and the Werewolves are just standing back, ready to strike when the time comes, because he's going to have to do something about this here. So as soon as he does, I'll be poised to countercharge. I waver the Iron Beast, and only put 7 damage on it. I must have rolled high to waver that thing. So that's good. That's blocking the way a bit. And he decides to go in with one of his Honor Guard units, and whatever this unit is here, it's not the Dogs of War, it's something else. They'll be just regular infantry horde. Well, they're probably not regular, they're probably really good, but you get the idea. Both of them go into the zombies. They'll be hoping to pop the zombies in one go. And they do, successfully. So I was hoping they could have survived one round there, and that would have left his flanks exposed for things like wraiths for shenanigans and such. But as it is, he's now able to face them off in other directions, so the zombies are gone. He kills Lykanis with this Honor Guard unit, which isn't nice. Going in hindered didn't matter to them because they've got the Potion of the Caterpillar. The Cavalry is still there, and the Revenant King on Wyrm is still up there as well. And you can see how it's looking here. I send the Werewolves into the front of the Dogs of War and send the Revenant Cavalry into the flank, hindered, but still it's a flank, so it's a lot of attacks, and I send the Skeletons into that flank, thinking, surely that's plenty of attacks, I've got to do a lot of damage, but it looks like I only do 8. So that is really, really disappointing outcome there. I mustn't have rolled very well with the Werewolves at all for that combat. Let's see, because really the Werewolves, let's go maths on this, shall we? So the Werewolves, in the front, they'll be hitting on 4s. So they should have been hitting with 9 of their attacks. And then those guys are defense 5, so I'll have been wounding on 3s. So on their own, the Werewolves probably should have done about 6 damage. And you'd expect 20 skeleton attacks in the flank and 32 Revenant Cavalry attacks in the flank would do more than a couple of damage points. But unfortunately not. Only get them up to 8. Over here, the Wraiths charge into his winged, I think it's winged Aralaz or something like that it's called for the League of Rordia. So he left a bit of a gap there, which I exploited with the Wraiths going in for the charge because he's so tall I could see him. I wasn't that interested in killing him. I just wanted to A, stop him flying, and B, I wanted to be behind his lines because then, especially behind this unit, if they were to cling on, then a rear charge from Wraiths, whether it takes surge or not, remains to be seen. Well, it will do now because that thing survived. But if I could have got behind them and got into the rear, that would have killed off that unit. So 6 damage on that. I'm fairly satisfied if that is 6 damage on him. I think it is. Because it was a flank, so they will have had 20 attacks there. Okay, so Honor Guard versus his Soul Reavers, two of the most powerful units in the game, going head to head. The Honor Guard are going to be hindered, so I fancy my chances a bit there, but they do have a lot of attacks. Let's see, those are the nimble ones. They're able to get around the Wraiths. Because the Wraiths and the Soul Reavers combined finished off the Iron Beast. So at the moment, it's looking fairly in the balance, I would say. The zombies going down is bad, of course, but I've killed quite a few of his units so far. We'll just have to see how the rest of these combats go. Not getting much damage on these guys from this triple charge is the low point so far. Over here, he gets a rear charge on the skeletons, which I'm not too worried about because they're going to die, but they're only skeletons, they're only cheap. I mean, in terms of this scenario, they're quite a good scoring unit, but as I was saying, if I'm going to win the tournament, I need to actually beat him 20-0. So I need to just kill everything he's got, so I can't be that worried about the scenario here. I have to just kill everything. I get, let's see, the werewolves get attacked by the dogs of war, and this guy's going to fly off in a minute, I think. Yep, so he doesn't fly because he was hurt, but he's still able to reach a charge along with the Honor Guard, and they double charge the Revenant King on Wyrm, who, was there actually a picture of him doing his attacks a minute ago? Yeah, he went in there to stop them flank charging the Revenant Cavalry, who almost certainly would have killed them and then just pivoted to face him anyway, so you might as well charge them. It was a front there and he did 1 damage. So he's going to get double charged now by that mess. And he's leaving the Revenant Cavalry alone, even though they're in his... I'm not sure if they're going to be in the flank anymore, but he's not worried about them because they're hindered in the woods. So they're not that big of a threat at this stage. And let's see what happens next. Over here, that fight is still going on. My Wraiths are still alive. They're going to be able to chip in with something. Necromancer there. And they kill the Revenant King on Undead Wyrm in 1 go. So the Potion of the Caterpillar prevented them being hindered. This guy chipped in as well. He's got really high nerve, so it took a lot to get rid of him, but they managed it. And next, over here, the Wraiths are dead. Volley gun to death. 1 round of volley gun shooting killed the Wraiths, so bad news there. Over here, the Werewolves, they only take 5 damage, but a nerve roll of 10 wavers them from the Dogs of War. So once he only did 5 damage there, I was thinking, okay, this is good. I've still got a chance here. I'm going to take this unit. My werewolves are still going to be alive, but wavered. So that's really, 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 really bad. I could have done with them not being wavered there. Not only because I can't countercharge, but also because even if I kill this unit, I won't be able to then pivot the werewolves around to avoid being flank charged by other units. So the skeletons are dead, of course, as expected. Over here, he's racking up some decent damage on the Soul Reavers, even though he's hindered. So those Honor Guard are just absolute beasts. So yes, it was a fairly bad turn. I put more damage back on them. I put 8 on them. Life leech a couple of wounds back, so it's still raging on this battle. Could go either way at this stage. Of course, he's not going to be hindered when it's countercharging, but he's going to lose his Thunderous Charge still because I'm damaging him, of course. He is Bane chanting them up, though. I didn't take any Bane chant in this list. I was seeing how I did with 0 Bane chant at all. I just tried to make my units not require Bane chant, either by having lots of crushing strength or like the zombies with the Hammer of Measured Force, so they always wound on 4s anyway. So I didn't take any Bane chant at all, just to see how that would go. Here, well, you can see that the Revenant Cavalry in the front and the Wraiths in the rear, they turned around and were surged into the Dogs of War, so they're dead. But of course the Werewolves, since they were wavered, they weren't able to be part of that combat, so they weren't allowed to pivot anywhere, which meant they get flank charged by this big unit here. And there's these scary units as well about to do some charging, which is going to be very scary. The Wraiths couldn't pivot anywhere else to avoid offering their flank because of the Battle Shrine there. So I've got the Dogs of War down, so I'm doing some decent killing. I'm also losing units at a decent rate as well, though. The Necromancer presumably does something, or he gets shot, maybe. Fighting that guy, perhaps. So he's still hanging in there. Oh, and look at this. The Honor Guard kill off the Soul Reavers. Yep, the Honor Guard are absolute monsters. You know what? I'm going to open up the book now and look at their stats. because I can't remember them all offhand, but they are insane, even compared to Soul Reavers, which are thought of as one of the best units in the game. So let's see. They're not as fast as Soul Reavers. I know that for a fact before I even get to them in the book. So here we go. Where are they? Honor Guard, large cavalry. So they're only speed 7, so they're slightly slower. Crushing strength 1, thunderous charge 2, which is the same as the Soul Reavers. They have 24 attacks, though, in a Horde instead of 20, so slightly better there. Their nerve is a little bit higher. They have defense 5 instead of defense 6. And they are slightly cheaper as well. So, yeah, the extra attacks are what make them absolute beasts, I think. For some reason, I was thinking they had 30 attacks. Maybe I was thinking of a different unit. Probably. So more attacks, more nerve, cheaper, tiny bit slower. So I would say the Honor Guard are among the best units in the game, based on my experience here, and based on what the people have said as well. They're just absolute monsters. So, the Soul Reaver's dead. Not looking good at this stage now. And the Werewolves are dead because they got charged in the flank due to being wavered with that unfortunate roll, as far as I'm concerned. And what's going on here? Oh, the Necromancers run off to hide. So the Revenant Cavalry also get killed because they get charged by this Honor Guard unit, so they just explode. So it's only the Wraiths and the Necromancer left now. So really it's all falling apart now. So once the Werewolves were wavered and the Soul Reavers died in one go, that was really game over from that point. So the Necromancer's just hiding as much as he can, so he can't be charged by anyone, and the Wraiths are just multi-charged to death because there's nowhere for them to hide. So this is actually the last picture because the Necromancer gets shot and killed from some kind of lightning bolt, and the Wraiths obviously get killed in this horrible mess here. So that is the end of the final game. I killed almost half his army, which I'm reliably informed is better than quite a few people did against this army. So it ended up, since he killed everything, it ended up being an 18-2 loss, which isn't the worst beating that he inflicted on anyone. And I was proud of going down swinging rather than trying to play it safe. And I think, obviously, had a few things gone my way, it could have been an even better result. Obviously, though, I was against a good player for him to be way in the lead at that stage of a tournament after beating some very solid players himself. And also, I think his list is quite monstrous, and I'm sure he's definitely played League of Rawdia recently more than I've been playing Undead, I think. So very, very proud of my performance here, managing to win 4 games, draw 1 and lose 1 in a tournament with a list I've never used before, when the field in the tournament was incredibly stacked with high-ranked players as well. So I'm very proud of that performance. As far as my final position in the table, well, as a result of that loss and people below me winning by just enough, I can tell you that 3 people jumped ahead of me by just 1 point, which is, of course, very sickening. And I ended up dropping down to 8th place from 2nd. So, wow. And, of course, 3 of those by a single point. So if I'd picked up 2 more points somewhere in the tournament, then I would have finished above 3 other players, which I would have been very satisfied with that. 8th, I think, is mildly unfair just to look at the final leaderboard, because going into the final round, I think I was the only player other than the winner that had a chance to still win the tournament going into the final game, possibly. I'm not sure on the exact maths of it, but I think that was pretty much the case. And of course, I had to win 20-0 to do it. But being in touch, it feels like, how to put this in a way that all people from different cultures and countries are going to understand. Okay, let's use the Olympics as an example. It feels like some kind of individual Olympic sport where you're competing directly against somebody. So you get to the gold medal match, which is what this felt like. So the winner is going to win the gold medal. The loser takes the silver medal. And then you lose, but then, of course, you don't get the silver medal because the person in the bronze medal matchup won by just steamrolling the opposition. So they jump ahead of you. So they get the silver medal. And then you also find out that like 5 other people below that also won another matchup by a hefty margin. So they jump ahead of you as well. So that's a good example of how it feels, I think, to drop that many places after being on the top table. I'm sure I'm not the first person that's happened to, though. It's probably the first time I've been on the top table in the last game of a tournament. So I'm very proud of my performance there. It was a very strong tournament, as I was saying. And of the players I beat, two of them definitely are very high ranked in the rankings and definitely very highly regarded. One of them is, it's not a lie to say, is the possibly the most experienced tournament player as well. I'm sure he'll laugh at me saying that because he goes to every single tournament, one of the players I defeated there. So very, very happy with my overall performance, getting 4 wins and a draw out of 6 games. It's slightly annoying to have dropped all the way down to 8th on the back of just 1 loss. And 2 of the people I beat actually finished above me. And I don't think, I'm not sure whether anyone finished above me with a better win, draw, loss record. It may only have been the tournament winner that had a better record than me in that regard. It was just the fact that all my wins were average to small wins because I didn't kill enough. So that's what it came down to, really. I didn't kill enough models in the opposing army. My wins weren't meaty enough. Because when I was looking at the kill points that everyone achieved, mine was like bottom 5 in the tournament, the amount of stuff I killed. But in terms of just win, loss, draw rate, then that probably would have put me at 2nd if it was scored based on that. If you got 3 points for a win, 1 for a draw, and 0 for a loss, then I'm 99% sure I would have actually finished 2nd in the table. But of course, that's not how it's scored, and you know how it's scored going in. So you've got to build a list that actually kills things as well as wins the scenarios. So I think I played most of the scenarios well, apart from slightly abandoning the scenario and going to try and kill things in game 2 that ended up getting me a draw there. But all the other scenarios, I think I played them quite well. I think I used some decent moves in most of the games. I was able to get a lot of rear charges with the Wraiths, which is the dream, because they only have 10 attacks. So getting it up to 30 with Surge is the absolute dream. And I was able to do that multiple times throughout the tournament, so I'm pleased about that. As far as the list goes, considering I'd never tried it before, I'm liking having that much speed in an army, although it doesn't have enough meat and enough killing power. It has killing power, I just don't think it has enough, and it doesn't have enough nerve to go around. I think maybe if I played the list differently, maybe I could kill more with it, but I think the amount of drops is quite low as well. There's only about 11 drops, but there are armies with less drops than that killed a lot, so maybe it's just my style of play. I'm sure you noticed in some of the scenarios, in some of the games, I kind of ran away units at the end and was quite conservative with them instead of going in to kill more things because I wanted to preserve the guaranteed scenario win. So I had a couple of really big scenario wins that ended up being not very big tournament point wins. So that's something to look at with my play style and my list building. Overall, it was a very, very good experience of the tournament. All my games were very friendly. Even the really charged top few table games, there were still jokes flying around. I managed to be my usual laid-back, joke-cracking self, despite the pressure of being on the top few tables in the tournament. I didn't move off the top 2 tables for the last 3 games, so that was good. Managed to get some really solid wins. If anyone has any questions or comments on that, then drop them in there right now if you want live reaction on those. If you're not watching this live, then I'll answer you in the comments later. If you've got any suggestions what I could do to tweak this list, if you're a bit of an undead expert, if you want any tactical tips, now that of course I'm Kings of War royalty, being on the top table in the final round of a 2-day tournament, then obviously I'm well placed to dispense advice that you can take with you and use to finish 8th. Let's see. Andreas Goodmanson, is Kings of War more fun than AOS? The community is more active, as far as I can tell, where I am. I know more people that play Kings of War, so that makes it more fun because I can actually get more games of it. As far as the games themselves go, I don't know if you could say it's more fun. It's just a totally different experience. When I'm playing Kings of War, I'm picking up strategies and tactics all the time, and that's what I'm thinking of. when I'm playing Age of Sigmar, I'm telling a story, and there are tactics involved, but it's just the mindset. I go into games of Age of Sigmar with the idea that I'm going to tell a funny story, pretty much, and build a little tale around the scenario. Whereas with Kings of War, it's much more, I look at it much more like a game of chess. So there's not so much a narrative game as it is, these are just game pieces to enact your strategy with. So it's two sides of the wargaming coin, and they're both aspects that I used to enjoy about Warhammer 8th edition. I used to try and get both of those things from that one game. And now that that's gone, I find that Age of Sigmar and Kings of War being played kind of back to back, that scratches both of the itches, as it were. Let's see. Neil Molden says, can you play Undead without mummies? I don't see a lot of mummies, actually, in Undead lists. I'll look into them, though. They're obviously solid. They've got good defense. I just don't see them a lot. Druddy says, were there any cheeseburgers served at the tournament? I didn't see a single cheeseburger. I did see lots of sandwiches being served. I, of course, brought my own because I have a strong distrust for anyone else preparing food. Mainly because of the ingredients used in it. I don't want to be eating something that I find disgusting. And most sandwiches tend to come like pre-smeared in butter, which is something I just can't stand. So I always just play it safe and take my own sandwiches. No cheeseburgers, though. There was... people were consuming a lot of alcohol. After I left on the Saturday, apparently some of them stayed up till about 3 in the morning, including the player that I was up against in the first game of Sunday. But he didn't seem in too low spirits, though, after a night of heavy drinking. And also, I'm not sure whether a hangover would have forced him to roll that many failed artillery hits. So I'm not sure that could be blamed there. And rolling double ones, of course, isn't inspired by how much alcohol he had the night before. Let's see. Stu Gibson says, buying the Kings of War rulebook is as far as I've got so far. I would like to start an army, but no players in my neck of the woods. Yeah, that's a difficult one. There are a few places where there just isn't a Kings of War community. I suppose the only thing you can do is just try and start your own, find someone else that wants to give it a go. Of course, usually people will know someone that has an old Warhammer army on square bases that can be used for Kings of War. It's worth giving it a try. And you never know, they might pick it up, and that may be the start of a blossoming local community for you there. Any other questions before I wrap this one up? I'm going to dig into the comments here, see if there's anything I missed while describing the action. I don't think so. Anyone who's stuck with this right to the end and listened to the entire thing, poring over every image, every beautiful image, and absorbing all the tactical insight and analysis into your tactical veins so that you'll then be able to use those strategies next time you're on the battlefield with your army. Good on you for lasting out this long. Neil Molden says, what is the general painting standard in the tournament scene? I would say obscenely high. There are a few players that have just ridiculously high level of painting skills. There were 2 armies in particular at this event that were really, really nice. And there were some really others that were really bright and vibrant, even if they weren't at the same ridiculous, like professional standard as the others. They were just so bright that they looked really cool as well, which is what I try to do when I take my orange goblins. I like them to stand out, even though they're technically not the best. As long as they look bright and they stand out on the table and they draw people's eye, that's what I'm going for with them. Stu Gibson, do kind of like Mantic's even stuntier dwarves, though. Yeah, the Mantic dwarves are quite nice. Not quite as nice as the Mantic Undead, I would say. I think the Undead are some of their best models. The new Abyssals are actually really nice. The new Trident Realms are really nice as well. The only ones I'm not so keen on from Mantic are really the Elves. I'm not that keen on the Dwarves for me, just because I wanted to put them with my existing Dwarf army, which was all GW Dwarves, and they don't look that great together. There's quite a style difference. But if you're going 100% Mantic Dwarves, then it's a very nice looking army. They look a bit more like Lord of the Rings dwarves, the Mantic ones. But you wouldn't really be able to use them with Lord of the Rings models and make them look like they're in any way cohesive, because the Lord of the Rings models are kind of a totally different scale with tinier heads, aren't they? Anything else before we go? Getting very close to hitting stop broadcast now. So let's just fly through those 6 games worth of images, sailing backwards at the speed of light. So you can hear the wonderful sound of clicking. It's like my life flashing before my eyes. Going all the way back, and as soon as we reach the start, then that will be the end. Anyone who does screen sharing, take notes. I've seen a few people doing this kind of thing where they keep all the images on their computer in a single folder, so they click too far and end up on like X-rated images and things like that. So there's a tip. Don't do that. If you have any X-rated images on your computer, don't put them in the same folder as anything you want to screen share with the world on YouTube. Although YouTube does have the wonderful blur feature out there, look at that. So proud of being on table 2, but then I was on table 1 in the last game, so I was even more proud, of course. Still going. Anyone who's a bit of a Kings of War pro or expert, I would be very appreciative of any insight and analysis into my performances or tactical choices or army list building that you've got to offer. Just because I'm now a Kings of War pro, being on the top table in the last round, that doesn't mean I'm not open to advice still, just because I'm essentially a god now. Still going. There's that very bright, vibrant Trident Realms army. And we're almost, yep, here we are back where it all started in game 1, where it was razor thin. Just that one move of parking the Revenant King in front of that unit got me the win instead of a loss. Can't get much closer than that. We're almost to the beginning now. Any final comments you've got that you want to be read and responded to live on the show? You're running out of time rapidly. Okay, there we go. I'm going to end this any second if no comments pop up. Okay, folks. So let's see, when is the next video to look out for? Well, the usual weekly live shows are going to be next week, I think. So there'll be 2 of those. And let's see, what else have I got coming up video-wise? I'm hoping to get some more battle reports. The Kings of War tournament reports don't actually take away any time from the battle reports, because I make a battle report out of every non-tournament game I play. So, and then I do a report on every tournament I'm at regardless, so it doesn't cut back the battle report content. I need to get an Age of Sigmar game in at some point and do another battle report for that. And I've got a video on how not to spill your washes as well coming up at some point soon. And let's see, anything else on the horizon? Oh, I need to do the what I painted in March video, which is very exciting because there's some quite beastly things in that. And okay, time to say goodbye, everybody. It's nearly 6 p.m. This is definitely the longest tournament report I've done yet, because it is 6 games rather than 4 like usual. So the next tournament I'm going to, I can't remember exactly when it's going to be. There's a couple coming up, but I'm not sure which ones I can actually attend yet. It depends. It relies not only on me being available, but also people living near me being available, so I can get a lift to these events as well, since I don't drive. Let's see. Okay, time to go. I wish everyone the best of luck in their own Kings of War tournament experiences, or their own gaming experiences in general. Make sure you keep it fun, even if you're being hyper-competitive. Don't be afraid to throw a joke in there now and then, even if time's running low on the clock. And I will catch you next time, folks. Ta-ta for now.